My mom said to me, "If you can't have a child, we should get a divorce." My husband responded calmly, "Fine, I understand, even though I'm currently pregnant." I'm Emily, a housewife in my 30s, living with my husband who works for a company. We first crossed paths while I was employed at a food-related company. Our conversations about business dealings were always pleasant, and I was charmed by his occasional smile. I mustered the courage to ask him out, but he turned me down, saying, "Sorry, I'm flattered, but I have a girlfriend." A month later, he approached me with a change of heart. I broke up with her. "Will you go out with me?" It turns out he had started noticing me after my confession. His ex-girlfriend, sensing something was amiss, had asked, "Did you fall for someone else?" When he agreed with her suggestion to break up, they ended their relationship. I felt a pang of guilt for being the catalyst for their split, but he reassured me with a warm smile, saying, "It wouldn't have lasted long anyway. Don't worry about it." His comfort eased my worries, and after 3 years of dating, we got married. When we decided to get married, he said, "I'd like us to have children after we're married. Would you be willing to stay home and support me and our future kids?" At that time, I was working at a demanding job and was eager for a change, so I agreed to become a stay-at-home wife. I was determined to support my husband and embrace this new role. The transition from a working woman to a housewife was challenging, but it was worth it for the joy of our newlywed life. Every day felt blissful, and the absence of any issues with my mother-in-law was a significant relief. Her house was only a 10-minute walk from our apartment. I initially worried about frequent visits and potential intrusiveness, but my fears proved unfounded. My in-laws were incredibly kind and supportive. Whenever I had a question, they made the effort to visit our home and explain things thoroughly. Despite our difficulties in starting a family, they were always understanding. My mother-in-law even told me, "You're more precious to me than a grandchild. I've always wished for a daughter since our family only had men. Please let me continue to cherish you like my own daughter." I adored my mother-in-law and trusted my quiet but dependable father-in-law. However, this harmonious relationship only lasted through the first few years. Over time, my once kind in-laws underwent a noticeable shift. My father-in-law became increasingly reserved, while my mother-in-law's demeanor changed drastically. Perhaps it was her true nature all along. Her attitude towards me went from being exceptionally warm to overtly cold. She has become quite harsh, frequently visiting our home, especially when my husband isn't around, and constantly nagging me about when we'll finally have a child. "It's your duty as a wife," she insists. This contrasts sharply with her previous attitude, where she once told me, "Children are gifts from heaven. They'll come in their own time, so don't rush." Now, she compares me to other families, adding pressure with remarks like, "The lady next door just had a baby, and the one next to her is expecting. What about you?" Despite her persistent pressure, it's been fruitless without my husband's involvement. He initially wanted children, but a year into our marriage, he lost interest. Even when I attempted to initiate intimacy, he would decline with excuses like, "I'm too tired, maybe another time," or "Don't bother me while I'm gaming." Despite discussing my struggles with my mother-in-law, she remained unsympathetic and continued to pressure me for a grandchild, only adding to my stress each day. Overwhelmed by her demands, I confided in my husband about the increasing pressure to have a child. He agreed to try for a baby with me, saying, "I don't think we need to rush." Despite our efforts, I didn't become pregnant. My mother-in-law continued to blame me, insisting, "It's because you're not trying hard enough. My son is not at fault at all." I even wondered if her constant criticism was making it more difficult for me to conceive. Unable to handle the mounting pressure, we decided to seek fertility treatment. I hoped this would finally ease my worries, but another issue emerged: my husband's behavior. Since we began the treatment, he became distant and cold, retreating to his room to play games after work and ignoring me when I tried to talk. This was difficult enough, but his frustration with my spending on crafting materials and his increasing volatility added to my distress. Whenever I stood up for myself, he would snap, "Who do you think allows you to live this way? You're just a housewife," and continued his selfish behavior. Even though I had quit my job at his request, he refused to acknowledge or address my concerns. One day, I came home to find him playing games during his usual work hours. I asked, "Aren't you going to work?" He simply replied, "I quit." He had resigned from his job without informing me. Shocked, I asked why, but he only grew angry, snapping, "It's none of your business." I was appalled by his response, but there was nothing I could do about a job he had already left. Initially, I wasn't too worried about finances, thinking we could get by with unemployment benefits and our savings. However, stress quickly mounted as my husband showed no interest in finding a new job. After quitting, my husband began spending all his time at home. I wished he would get out more, but he preferred to stay indoors, only venturing out to buy cigarettes. Our time together has increased significantly since he stopped working. At first, this seemed like an opportunity for more closeness, but it quickly turned sour. Just like with my mother-in-law, the constant proximity to my husband, whose attitude has shifted from warm to cold, has led to frequent arguments. I've come to realize that even simple conversations with him are now stressful, and we've almost stopped talking altogether. I find myself questioning whether this kind of married life is worth continuing. I started to feel like I had reached my breaking point with this marriage and began searching for a way out. Fed up with his endless gaming, I confronted him. "You're not a child. Stop playing games all day and start looking for a job." He then mentioned, "By the way, my mom said if you can't have a child, we should get divorced." In that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if my mother-in-law was indirectly helping me. I had just discovered that I was pregnant after a checkup that day, and I had planned to share the news with him that evening. However, deciding not to tell him right away seemed like the right choice. It allowed me to distance myself from both my mother-in-law and my husband. I handed him the divorce papers, which I had pre-filled and kept in a drawer. "Okay, I understand. Here are the divorce papers," I said. My husband, clearly unprepared for this turn of events, looked stunned and speechless as he saw the papers. His usual commanding demeanor vanished, replaced by a bewildered expression. He seemed at a loss for words but began filling out the documents, clearly feeling compelled to comply with his mother's wishes. As he completed the forms, he kept casting glances at me, still processing the shock. We agreed to discuss property division later, but there wasn't much to divide. Our assets were minimal, largely because my husband had a tendency to spend extravagantly on his hobbies. While he criticized my spending, he was far more reckless with his own money, frequently splurging on gaming and amusement arcades. He had always been bad with saving money, both before and after our marriage, so we had no significant assets to divide. When it became clear that there was no real property to split, I thought our discussion was finished. However, my husband insisted otherwise. He pointed to a bank statement and said, "Don't we still have our savings?" The statement showed a substantial amount of savings, which he suggested we divide. I explained, "This money is from before our marriage, so it isn't part of the property division." His face went pale, but he countered, "Fine, but this apartment should be included in the division, right? I lived here too." I had to deliver some difficult news. "Unfortunately, the apartment is in my name, so you have no claim to it. Additionally, I've already listed it for sale, so you'll need to move out soon. Please make arrangements to leave. It would be inconvenient for you to stay here," I said with a calm smile. I had been saving for a future home, anticipating that this apartment might eventually be too small. Saving money had always been a hobby of mine, and I had accumulated substantial savings before our marriage. Even as a regular employee, I was able to purchase the apartment with those savings. So I did have some assets. With the proceeds from the sale, I planned to build a new house in the city center. Of course, this property, being from before our marriage, was not subject to division. It seemed my husband was unaware of this detail. He apparently believed he would be entitled to half of my property, but that was not the case. When he realized he wouldn't receive any part of it, he was left stunned. The shock left him in a daze as we continued our discussion, but he struggled to recover his composure. With little left to discuss, the conversation wrapped up quickly, and we proceeded to submit the divorce papers to our lawyers. The divorce was finalized smoothly. A few months later, I moved back to my parents' home, and with their support, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I named him Ambrose, inspired by the phrase, "A boys be ambitious." Now, I'm enjoying a fulfilling life with my parents and my cherished child. I haven't informed my ex-husband or his family about Ambrose. I'm certain that if I did, my former mother-in-law would come storming in, demanding, "Give me back my grandchild." As for my ex-husband, after being forced out of the apartment, he returned to his parents' home. He has become a recluse, unable to cope with the ease of our divorce. His behavior is so suspicious that he often gets stopped by the police when he ventures outside. It's a rather pitiable situation. I later discovered that his decision to quit his job stemmed from deteriorating work relationships. It turns out my ex-husband was disliked at his company for his constant bad-mouthing, particularly by his female colleagues, and eventually, everyone began to ignore him. Unable to bear the isolation, he abruptly resigned. Perhaps his true nature was evident even before our marriage, kind only to me, while hiding his true colors beneath a facade. 3 years later, I was working as the manager of a craft store. After becoming a regular customer at a local shop, the manager, Linda, approached me with an offer. I'm getting older and considering retirement. If you're interested, Emily, would you like to take over this store? Linda asked. At that time, my parents were actively helping with childcare, and I was looking for a new job. If I turned down the offer, the store would close, which would inconvenience many loyal customers. Weighing these factors, I decided to accept and take over the store. While attending to a regular customer today, I was surprised by an unexpected visit from my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. Wow, this is a lovely shop, my ex-husband remarked. Yeah, Mom, look at this fabric. It would look great on you, he added. Annoyed by their obvious flattery, I asked, what are you doing here? My former mother-in-law then demanded, give me back my grandson. It seemed she had somehow learned about my child's birth and wanted him as the heir to their family. You were already pregnant when I asked for the divorce. Why didn't you tell me? If I had known, I wouldn't have gone through with it, my ex-husband accused. That's exactly why I wanted a divorce. If you had known about the pregnancy, you would have done everything you could to prevent it. I shot back, glaring at him and my former mother-in-law. My former mother-in-law then demanded, so, are you going to give me back my grandchild or not? I want to live with him soon. You've had him for 3 years. Now it's my turn. Her entitlement was staggering. As I stood there, incredulous, my parents and Ambrose arrived, having been alerted by a regular customer. What's going on? Is there a problem? They asked, clearly concerned and ready to assist. Seeing Ambrose holding hands with my parents, my former mother-in-law tried to approach him, saying, oh, he's so cute. Just like my son when he was young. Look, I'm your grandma. I attempted to intervene, but it wasn't necessary. Ambrose, clinging to my mother, said firmly, this is my only grandma. Can you please leave now? My mother nodded and asked the former mother-in-law to leave, but she insisted, just give me the child. Meanwhile, my ex-husband, eager to forcibly take Ambrose from my parents, advanced. I moved in front of Ambrose to protect him, but being much smaller, I was easily pushed aside. Ambrose, be careful, I shouted. My ex-husband was just inches away from grabbing Ambrose when suddenly his body was lifted off the ground. Looking up, I saw my father, who had executed a precise shoulder throw. Unbeknownst to my ex-husband, my father was a police officer with advanced judo skills. Stunned and in pain, my ex-husband looked up at my father with a mixture of fear and disbelief. If you continue to harass my child or grandchild, I will take further action, my father warned, displaying his police badge. Seeing this, my former mother-in-law, now pale and shaken, quickly pulled my ex-husband away, and they fled. I don't know what happened to them after that, and honestly, I have no desire to find out. Several years later, inspired by my father, Ambrose set his sights on becoming a police officer. I want to be a police officer when I grow up so I can protect Mom too, he said with determination. He has been working hard in his studies to achieve this goal, and is now undefeated in judo among his peers, thanks to my father's training. I'm excited to see my son grow into a remarkable person.
You need to get out of that wheelchair quickly, or you might get hurt. I could hear Tyler's happy voice behind me as I desperately tried to stop the wheelchair from speeding up. I pulled on the brakes as hard as I could with my hands. Tyler was someone who didn't care much about money, but we were supposed to be celebrating our love that day. As I struggled with the out-of-control wheelchair, I felt more angry than sad. Suddenly, something got caught, and I was thrown out of the wheelchair. There was a loud noise, and I blacked out. The next day, I woke up in a hospital room. Tyler was crying on the next bed. After a while, he noticed me and started talking, trying to sound comforting. "Are you okay, Amy?" "I'm glad," he said with a forced smile. Then he started talking about how he got hit by a car and lost his leg. He became more emotional and showed me his amputated leg under the blanket. "Hey, you're going to help me, right? We're married, aren't we?" he said, expecting me to agree. But I refused. Tyler was shocked. "Who's going to help me then?" he asked. I decided to share my thoughts. I told him about myself, that I'm Amy Moore, a 45-year-old illustrator who used to love being active. I even competed in national swimming competitions when I was younger. But about 2 years ago, I got a disease that made my left leg weak. Now, I can't walk without a wheelchair. I explained how Tyler and I met at a group date and fell in love. We got married after dating for 3 years. We were happy until I became disabled. That's when Tyler's attitude changed. He started demanding money from my family to make our home accessible and to hire a helper. When I told him I planned to use my savings for that, he got upset, worrying that it would affect his inheritance. Tyler tried to apologize and backtrack, saying he thought we would need a lot of money from now on, but I saw through his excuses. I didn't trust Tyler's excuses. He seemed obsessed with keeping our money intact. Despite my doubts, I tried to convince myself that it was just his usual stinginess. Tyler kept bringing up inheritance and insurance. His excuses turned into suggestions like upgrading our insurance policy. I couldn't understand why he was so fixated on money. In the end, despite Tyler's protests, I decided to use my savings and bonus to make our home wheelchair accessible. I also hired a housekeeping service 3 times a week to help with chores. The woman in charge was kind, and I enjoyed chatting with her during breaks. But Tyler seemed to dislike her. He nitpicked everything she did, from folding laundry to washing dishes. His complaints annoyed me, and one day, I exploded in anger. Tyler's response shocked me. He said he'd deduct the amount we paid the housekeeper from our living expenses. That meant I'd have to cover the extra cost, as Tyler planned to keep that money for himself. I was stunned. Our living expenses were already tight, and tripling my contribution wasn't feasible. Tyler didn't seem to care. He thought since I was earning, I should foot the bill. But my income wasn't enough to cover such a huge increase in expenses. However, Tyler didn't show any signs of backing down. He agreed, but asked me to make sure to save that extra $1,000 properly. With Tyler agreeing so cheerfully, I couldn't shake off the anxiety building inside me. And unfortunately, my worries soon came true. Tyler stopped griping about the housekeeping agency, but in turn he stopped helping with any chores around the house. I tried to remind him that we still needed to pitch in with daily chores, even though we hired help. But Tyler brushed it off, saying that since we were paying for it, they should do everything. He started spending more time away from home, barely talking to me when we did cross paths, wearing a disgusted expression on his face. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind. Then out of the blue, Tyler suggested we go see the cherry blossoms at the botanical garden. It was a surprising invitation after 2 months of minimal interaction. His cheerful demeanor during our outing momentarily eased my troubled heart. Maybe our recent problems stemmed from not talking enough, I thought optimistically. But as we strolled, Tyler dropped a bombshell. He confessed that he was out of money and needed my insurance payout urgently. Confused and alarmed, I panicked when I realized he was pushing my wheelchair downhill without my control. Desperately, I tried to stop the speeding wheelchair, but Tyler's voice echoed merrily behind me, warning me of the danger. Despite my efforts to hit the brakes, the wheelchair hit an obstacle, throwing me off, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up the next day, I found myself in a hospital room. Tyler was beside me on the next bed, crying. After noticing I was awake, he spoke to me with a pleading smile. "Amy, you're safe. I'm glad. I was hit by a car. My leg. Tyler became increasingly emotional and uncovered himself, revealing that he only had one leg. "You'll help me, right? We're husband and wife, aren't we?" "I refuse," I replied firmly. Tyler was stunned. He never expected me to refuse. Speechless, he stared at me. Why would I help someone who pushed me down a hill just to get insurance money? It was a moment of madness. I regret it. Saying sorry won't fix everything. If you were supposed to save $1,000 a month for me, what happened to that? "I am doing that," Tyler stammered. "Oh, really? Then you can pay for this hospital stay with that money." Tyler panicked because his bank account was almost empty. I knew this because I managed our finances and kept track of our bank accounts. I discovered that instead of saving money, Tyler was sending it to another woman. I hired a detective and found out Tyler had cheated on me and had a child with his affair partner. The money was going to his affair partner as child support for his kid, 4 years old. Cute age, huh? Have you been visiting her? How long have you known? A month now, I revealed. Tyler was shocked. Then I dropped another bomb on him. Really? I was shocked because you're paying child support for someone else's child. Tyler looked confused because he believed the child was his own. I couldn't help but laugh. What the hell are you talking about? That kid is truly mine, Tyler said angrily. Hearing this, I burst out laughing even more. Tyler looked at me as if I was something creepy. So, I decided to reveal the truth to him. You see, you can't even have children, I said, laughing at his bewildered expression. Since we met, you really thought I was the reason we couldn't have kids. Well, I was considerate and didn't tell you, but your father knows. It's a lie, Tyler said, his face drained of color. In reality, we had been trying infertility treatments for about 3 years since we got married. Tyler reluctantly took the test, and it turned out the issue was with him. But after discussing with my father-in-law, we decided not to tell Tyler. My father-in-law believed Tyler, who was emotionally fragile, wouldn't handle the news well. After explaining all this, Tyler suddenly called someone on his phone. Hey, you had an affair, didn't you? The kid isn't mine, is it? Tyler yelled into the phone. I realized he was talking to his affair partner. They argued back and forth, but it seemed Tyler was getting nowhere. At that moment, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard Tyler accuse her of having an affair too. Ignoring Tyler's heated conversation, I brought the discussion back to us. Remember signing the papers when we decided to save that $1,000 you spent? I asked. Tyler seemed dismissive, but I sighed, knowing he probably planned to backtrack anyway. I showed him a photo on my phone. It's written here that in the event of misuse, divorce, and the entire amount spent up to the discovered month will be paid to the wife, Amy. It's properly checked. And there's a signature too, right? It's even notarized. Tyler looked frustrated, then turned to me with desperate eyes. Please, Amy, I was just possessed. Please don't say divorce, okay? Besides, I can't pay such a large amount. Divorce is settled. I can't do it anymore. But don't worry, you can pay the spent amount in installments. Seeing him like that, with a face like he was the victim, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I sighed and called out to the figure hiding at the entrance of the hospital room. Please come in, Dad. As his father-in-law entered, Tyler shouted, but his father-in-law's face was red with anger. This is the end of our relationship. What are you talking about? Tyler asked, confused. His father-in-law came over to me, apologizing. I'm truly sorry. I won't ask for forgiveness, and it's fine if you don't. Please file a complaint. I'm just glad Amy is safe. Thank you. I could see tears streaming down his face, and I glared at Tyler, knowing he was the reason for making my beloved father-in-law feel this way. Don't you feel anything seeing this? It's your fault. Always spending money, earning more than me, and your rich family is stingy. I don't know why I married you. So you were after the money too? I said, feeling like all our beautiful memories had been tainted. My voice was the lowest it had ever been. Tyler looked surprised, and I forced a smile. Marrying for money and then having to pay it back in the end. Huh, shut up. I'm not paying. Too bad. Payment is a done deal, my father-in-law said sternly to Tyler, who went pale and started shaking. Just then, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat entered, interrupting the tense atmosphere. He handed me a document. Is there a reason you're not receiving treatment for your leg? He asked. Confused, I looked at Tyler, who avoided my gaze. If you have surgery on your leg, you'll be able to move again. Didn't you hear that when you were diagnosed before? The doctor continued. I didn't hear, I said, looking at Tyler, who remained silent. Realizing something was wrong, I turned to the doctor. Could you please tell me the diagnosis directly? I didn't hear it at the time. The doctor explained that my illness was temporary paralysis caused by a herniated disc, and with rehabilitation, I would be able to walk again. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had trusted Tyler's lies about my condition, but now I knew the truth. There's not a shred of affection left. Tyler, what's going on? Say something. My father-in-law yelled, but Tyler just cried, overwhelmed by everything. And in that moment, I realized that if I were free from Tyler, I could truly roam the world again. I'm always left behind. If she's in a wheelchair, she will always stay home and won't have more fun than me, right? So what? Your selfish jealousy has forced me to live in a wheelchair for 2 years, knowing I could have surgery to eliminate the pain and paralysis, and you kept silent. That's the worst. At my words, Tyler hangs his head in exhaustion. I look at him with cold eyes, and both the doctor and my father-in-law seem angry at Tyler for selfishly denying me my chance for treatment. So, Amy, may I explain the surgery to you tomorrow? The doctor asks. Yes, please do, I say, instantly brightening up. The doctor smiles back warmly, giving me hope for a bright future ahead. I will instruct the nurse to separate the rooms, the doctor says. No, I don't want to be separated from Amy, Tyler loudly refuses, but the doctor ignores him and leaves the room. Amy, you're not really gonna divorce me, right? I'm an amputee, remember? I know I was wrong to keep quiet, but think about our current situation, Tyler pleads. Despite my father-in-law yelling at Tyler for his selfishness, he stands his ground. After about 10 minutes of silence, I reluctantly speak up. Then I'm gonna work and you'll handle the chores. If you ask for a service, you'll pay for it. Oh, and I'll deduct that amount from the living expenses. Tyler protests, saying he can't live like that, but I point out that's exactly what he said to me. Finally noticing, Tyler's face turns pale as he freezes in place. Realizing the gravity of his words, my father-in-law's face also turns pale. It must have been a shock to learn that his son had said such terrible things to his wife. Well, let's talk through lawyers from now on, and about the compensation too, I say, ready to move forward. Wait, Amy, Tyler calls out as a nurse comes into the room. It seems I'm moving rooms so Tyler can't easily barge in anymore. Tyler resists to the end, screaming as I leave the room, his cries fading as the door closes behind me. After being pushed out of the room by the nurse, I met my father-in-law's eyes, and we exchanged nods. That was the last time I saw Tyler. A few months later, I received divorce papers from him through a lawyer, and the divorce was successfully finalized. I heard that Tyler was quite disheartened and is now living under the strict supervision of my father-in-law. Although he managed to keep his clerical job, it seems that news of the divorce leaked, and his colleagues, who were initially concerned about his injury, now look at him coldly. Tyler brought this upon himself, but I heard him lamenting about being harassed by his colleagues. I couldn't help but bitterly smile, realizing he hasn't changed a bit. Despite the divorce, I still meet my father-in-law occasionally. Initially, he seemed apologetic, but recently he's getting back to his usual self. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Tyler's affair partner was married and had been married to the real father of her child. I sent evidence of the affair and child support transfers to her husband, which caused a huge dispute and eventually led to their divorce. Although I received a resentful letter at the lawyer's office, I ignored it. Meanwhile, I underwent surgery immediately after the divorce and spent about 6 months in the hospital for physical therapy. Thanks to my father-in-law's arrangements, I could continue working while staying in a private room. After being discharged, ongoing physical therapy and regular checkups helped me regain mobility, and now I can walk with a cane. Recently, I've been taking walks around the house. I even exchanged contact information with someone I met during these walks and promised to go for a meal. He's a very kind person who helped me when I stumbled and fell over a rock. These days, the exhilarating feeling of a new spring fills me with excitement, and I feel unstoppable. My mother-in-law said she wants my son to marry someone else. She thinks you're too old for him because you can't have kids, my mother-in-law said, smiling at a younger woman next to her. My husband, sitting silently beside her, didn't say anything. Feeling upset, I stormed out of the room. But soon after, I regretted it and wanted to make things right. I feel really bad about marrying into this family. My name's Olivia, and I'm 38 years old. I met my husband, Sam, who's 8 years younger, through a friend. I was unsure about dating him because of our age gap, but he insisted that age doesn't matter. I love you, Olivia, he said, and we started dating. Eventually, we got married after 6 months. When Sam introduced me to his parents, his mother didn't like me because of our age difference. When you said you were bringing a woman to consider marrying, I thought she'd be young and cute. 38 years old, Sam. I mean, no offense, but think about it again. Younger women are usually better, she told Sam right in front of me. My father-in-law intervened, saying, if Sam thinks she's good, then she's good, right? Sorry for my wife's rude comments, Olivia. Eventually, we got their approval for our marriage. My father-in-law was good at smoothing over my mother-in-law's harsh words, making it seem like he didn't want any conflict. But after we got married, he often ignored issues, which was disappointing. Sam's family was well known as landowners in our small town, and my mother-in-law loved to brag about it. Even though she wasn't technically related by blood, she married into the family, just like me. This family is very wealthy, and Sam, being the favorite, has a charming and dreamy aura. My previous partner was very careful with money, which was tough. So Sam's relaxed and generous attitude towards money is quite attractive to me. Even though my mother-in-law reluctantly accepted our marriage after my father-in-law scolded her, she doesn't seem happy about it. She keeps telling me how a good wife should act, which is frustrating. She's influential among the local women and takes pride in leading the women's association and being popular. She insisted I take time off during the week to meet the association members. She believes it's important to impress them. She introduced me proudly, but some of them hinted that she might not be as well liked as she thinks. Oh, and she also told me to get a medical checkup to see if I could have children. I was a bit put off that it was her, not Sam, who ordered it, but I was also curious to know if I could get pregnant, so I agreed. Gynecological exams aren't exactly a walk in the park. Despite being important for women's health, they're uncomfortable. Does anyone else find sitting in that examination chair waiting unbearable? Despite the discomfort, my bridal health check results were good. I felt relieved when the doctor said, "You're healthy." Sam seemed worried, but he looked relieved when I told him the news. I shared the results with my mother-in-law, hoping we could finally celebrate our marriage happily. But then she said, "Good that you've passed the first hurdle." The first hurdle? What did she mean by that? I thought she'd be happier. Was she secretly hoping for bad news? As I tried to figure out how to respond, my mother-in-law surprised me with a proposal. After you get married, let's build a duplex and live together. You'll split the down payment and mortgage. You work in administration, right? Your salary might not be high, but you should be able to handle it at your age. A duplex? Living together? Splitting the costs with me? I felt overwhelmed by this sudden flood of suggestions. I looked at my husband sitting beside me, hoping for some support, but he remained silent. "Could you please chime in?" I asked him. I haven't discussed anything about living together with Sam. And, well, before we talk about a duplex and living arrangements, I'd like to address the comment about my job," I said, feeling a bit hurt. "You haven't discussed it." "Oh, well, Sam probably thought it was understood. That's not good. We'd always planned that when Sam gets married, we'll all share a house and live together," my mother-in-law insisted. I felt a chill run down my spine. Always? Is she implying she drilled this idea into Sam's head by repeating it constantly? "That's correct. That's what I had in mind." "Wait, you didn't know about this? Why are you agreeing so easily?" my mother-in-law questioned. "I'm sorry, but I had no idea about this plan, and I can't make a decision without discussing it with Sam first. Can we please hold off on this for now? I said before leaving my in-laws' house. Later, when I talked to Sam, he admitted that after we got married, he intended to build a duplex on his parents' property and live with them. I was furious that Sam hadn't told me about his plans, but when he apologized and said he forgot, I couldn't stay mad. I thought I might not find someone as kind and handsome as Sam at my age, so I ignored the warning signs and went ahead with the marriage. Looking back, I realized I should have been more cautious. I ended up going along with my mother-in-law's wishes and helped pay for a duplex where we'd live with Sam's parents. 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I kept it a secret from my in-laws until I was sure everything was stable. When I finally told them, they were thrilled and started discussing baby names, assuming it would be a boy, although we didn't know the gender yet. Despite feeling pressure, it's nice to see them happy. I was advised to quit my job for safety reasons, but since I help with my family's business, I have some flexibility. I decided to keep working as long as it doesn't strain me too much. My pregnancy was going smoothly, and I started feeling the baby's movements, a long-awaited joy. It's a mysterious yet happy feeling to sense a tiny life stirring inside me. I'm grateful for the joy of being a woman and experiencing this miracle. Sam, my husband, and my in-laws eagerly anticipate the baby's growth at each checkup, and I can't wait for the child's birth. I have a feeling that my relationship with my mother-in-law will improve once the baby arrives. One day, when everything seemed perfect, I noticed the baby's movements were weakening. I felt an indescribable anxiety and rushed to the hospital. The doctors gave me heartbreaking news. Something was wrong with the baby. Why? How? I was living normally. What did I do wrong? I was gripped with fear over the risks. I was hospitalized immediately, but despite the doctor's efforts, my child passed away. Just a few more months and I could have held my baby. Why did this happen so suddenly? It felt like just yesterday when the baby was moving so energetically inside me. Was it my fault? As I cried in sorrow, my husband's words pierced through my pain. How long will you cry? It's over now, isn't it? Crying won't bring the baby back. Stop crying. I was stunned. What was Sam saying? Our child had just passed away. Even though I was taken aback by this cold side of Sam I had never seen before, my shattered state of mind left me unable to speak. Then came the day I was discharged from the hospital. Sam didn't come to pick me up. I managed to force a smile and reassure the nurses who were concerned about me going home alone. When I arrived home in a taxi, Sam, my mother-in-law, and an unfamiliar woman greeted me. "Welcome back. It's a shame, isn't it?" said my mother-in-law with a strange smile. "Yes," I responded, taking a seat on the living room couch as suggested. The seating arrangement was strange, with my mother-in-law and the woman sitting across from me on a bench, and Sam sitting next to them, showing no effort to comfort me or make eye contact. As my mother-in-law spoke, my heart sank. "We've talked it over with Sam. Since you can't have children anymore, we don't see the point in keeping you as our daughter-in-law. We're thinking of having this other girl marry Sam instead." Hearing those words while still reeling from the shock of losing my baby, tears filled my eyes. But I refused to let myself break down. I had to stay strong, telling myself that crying would mean giving up. I kept my head down, unable to look up. Ignoring my distress, my mother-in-law continued heartlessly. "If you're willing to work and support our family instead of having children, we might consider letting you stay. What do you think? Can I count on you to take care of us if they leave me behind?" Confusion and disbelief washed over me. Without thinking, I looked at my husband for support. But when our eyes met, Sam quickly looked away. Beside him, a woman who seemed triumphant stared back at me. I remembered her as Sam's childhood friend, introduced to me at our wedding. Seeing that my husband wouldn't even meet my gaze, I realized he's not on my side. He won't help me. A chill ran down my spine, and strangely, my mind became clear. They must have discussed this during my hospitalization. They planned to replace me, the woman who can't have children, with a younger wife who can bear in hair. If I stay here, I'll only suffer. There's nothing for me here anymore. With newfound clarity, I addressed Sam. I understand where you stand. Let's get a divorce. Please, go and live happily with your new wife. Leaving the house, I returned to my family home. My parents, surprised but warmly welcoming, were already aware of my miscarriage. They were outraged by the cruelty I had faced so soon after leaving the hospital. Their warm reaction was a relief after everything, and I ended up crying a lot that day. Exhausted from tears, I fell asleep. However, the next day, my mother-in-law and husband, who had shown such cruelty in driving me out, unexpectedly showed up at my family home. At first, my mother dealt with them normally, but once she realized who they were, she refused to engage with them. Then, they started incessantly ringing the doorbell, shouting, "We've canceled the divorce. Come back now." You see, my family runs a barbecue restaurant, a well-known spot that serves a globally famous brand of beer. It's frequented by many celebrities and athletes who enjoy our delicious food. However, my husband's family comes from an old, respected background, and they looked down on our family, thinking that running a restaurant was somehow shady. They had this outdated belief that restaurant businesses were inferior, and they saw our family as less well-off. We even invited them to dine with us once before the marriage, but they declined, saying, "Beef. We always eat at certain places. Eating meat from other restaurants gives me heartburn. Sorry." During the pre-wedding meetings, they indirectly belittled my family with remarks like, "Oh, you run a restaurant, right? That's so old-fashioned. Oh, I see, from your parents' generation. Dealing with beef, huh? Well, respectable families don't engage in such businesses." It hurt to see my parents, who had worked hard to raise me, being treated this way, but they brushed it off with a laugh, saying there are always people with narrow mindsets. On the day I left after the divorce, my husband and mother-in-law happened to see our restaurant being featured on TV. Up until then, they had shown no interest and considered my family beneath them. But they panicked when they saw the restaurant described as running its own farm that produces top-quality beef, enjoying extreme popularity with meat exported worldwide, being highly successful and lucrative. Suddenly, they tried to cozy up to me, saying, "If your family were wealthy, we wouldn't have talked about divorce. We're sorry for yesterday. We weren't thinking clearly. Please come back." After all their talk about children and heirs, was it really all about money in the end? My husband Sam and his family never asked much about my job, so I had simply told them I worked in office administration for my family's company, leading them to believe I was a low-paid and incompetent employee. Consequently, they probably assumed that asking me to pay for the house would make me give up on the marriage. In reality, I managed the meat export division of my parents' company, earning a substantial income for an office worker. Fortunately, I had saved up a good amount due to getting married later in life, allowing me to provide the money they demanded. I am also a major shareholder in the company and aspire to eventually take over my father's position to further expand the business. Despite this, they had never shown any interest or asked me about my role until it was highlighted on TV, leading to an overnight change in their treatment of me. Despite incessantly talking about wanting children, it became apparent that money was their primary concern. Their shallowness appalled me. Finally, my father, who had been silently observing the situation, lost his temper and kicked Sam and his parents out. "Thank you, Dad. You saved me," I said. My father, still seething with anger, began drinking and cursing at them. He had me explain everything from before the marriage without holding back any details, believing I couldn't handle this alone. My father promptly contacted a lawyer he knew, leading to a demand for damages since I was unjustly evicted. We also asked for reimbursement for the housing funds I had provided during our cohabitation. The claim was acknowledged, and it was decided that I would receive a refund for the expenses I covered. However, Sam alone couldn't repay the loan I had taken out, so his family home had to be sold. They had built a lavish house on rural property just for show, leaving a considerable mortgage remaining even after the sale. Moreover, the house was filled with the eccentricities of Sam's mother, making finding a buyer willing to accept it as is doubtful, suggesting that disposal could take time. Fortunately, they managed to sell some land they owned separately, allowing me to recoup my money first, which was a relief. At this point, I was grateful for marrying into a landlord's family. Sam and his parents were forced to leave their beloved two-family home and now seem to be struggling in a rented apartment, facing difficulty repaying their loan. As for the woman who was planning to marry Sam, she was only interested because she thought she'd live in a big house and that his family was wealthy. But as soon as she found out they were going to lose the house and still be in debt, she disappeared. It was probably the best decision for her because if she had married him, she might have been pressured to have a child and forced to work due to her young age. News travels fast in this rural area. Gossip spreads like wildfire, especially when it involves a well-known family like Sam's. People are buzzing with interest, commenting on how poorly they treated me and how they used to flaunt their big house, but are now in debt and living in an apartment. With both the wife and potential new wife gone, their family line might end with this generation. It's incredible how accurate the rumors are and makes you wonder who's been watching all this. The power of a rural network is quite something. Now my bossy mother-in-law, who used to act like she owned the place, sneaks around even when shopping, worried about people's stares. My parents remind me, "We warned you not to marry into a family that would insist on testing if you could get pregnant before marriage, didn't we?" and brush off the situation. They even console me in their own way, saying, "Olivia just rushed into marriage a bit. Don't worry about it. It's fine if you stay home." They try to be understanding in their own way. Despite the troubles of being kicked out and going to court, I can see they're happy to have their daughter back home. I'm grateful for their warmth. It feels like I was just dreaming or living a nightmare during my married life. But now I'm free. I may have a divorce behind me, but I'm still in my 30s. I haven't given up on marriage. Once things settle down, I plan to work hard to find a new partner. But for now, maybe I'll focus on doing good things for my parents. Greetings, everyone. I'm Skyla, and it was my sister-in-law Julia who encouraged me to share my story. Julia and I share a strong bond, having worked together before I met my now husband Noah through her. I am truly grateful to Julia for introducing us, and Noah and I have built a wonderful life together. While Julia and Noah are fantastic people, Noah's mother Susan is a different story. Upon our introduction, Susan openly expressed her dislike for me, creating tension in our relationship. Despite Noah's efforts to change his mother's opinion, Susan remained hostile. Over time, I realized the extent of her problematic behavior, especially during our wedding, where she falsely accused me of ruining her dress. Noah and I frequently clashed over his mother, but Susan's presence persisted. Being a single mom, Susan held onto Noah tightly, making it difficult for him to cut ties. The turning point occurred on our first anniversary when Julia warned me about Susan's plan to humiliate me. Susan, determined to tarnish my image, intended to frame me for stealing her heirloom necklace. Despite my attempts to intervene, Susan remained steadfast in her malicious intentions. This revelation added another layer of stress to our already strained relationship, as I navigated the challenges of preserving my marriage while dealing with Susan's disruptive presence. As our first anniversary approached, I faced the dilemma of inviting Susan or protecting my peace of mind. Despite Noah's desire to include his mother, the looming threat of Susan's schemes cast a shadow over what should have been a joyous occasion with close friends and family. I had hoped for a joyful celebration with everyone, but Susan's presence cast a shadow over the occasion. Despite learning about her plans from Julia, I hesitated to inform Noah. I believed he needed to confront the reality of his mother's actions and sever ties with her. Vigilant, I kept a watchful eye on Susan, but never caught her in the act. As the day of the anniversary party arrived, Julia and I remained unable to intercept Susan. However, the situation took a turn when Susan approached me with a menacing threat. During the party, as I was refilling my drink, she cornered me and accused me of orchestrating a scheme to take Noah away from her. Confused by her baseless claims, I questioned her connection between my marriage anniversary and her perceived competition. Undeterred, Susan insisted that I was responsible for Noah distancing himself from her. Her ominous warning hinted at the impending drama she had planned. Julia stayed close, recognizing the potential for Susan's disruptive behavior. As the party continued, Susan excused herself to put on her jewelry, only to return in distress, claiming her necklace and earrings were missing. Julia and I exchanged knowing glances, realizing that Susan had orchestrated a scheme to frame me. Despite Susan's theatrical display of distress, we maintained our composure, silently observing her attempts to convince the guests that I had stolen her jewelry. As people questioned her about the missing items, Susan tearfully responded, but suddenly feigned realization and exclaimed, "Wait a minute now. I understand that my jewelry has been stolen. I have a strong suspicion about who might have taken it." "Mom, what are you talking about? I'm sure you have misplaced it, and it's lying somewhere here. We don't have many visitors, so how could it get stolen?" "Noah, you don't understand. No one broke into the house or came from outside to steal my precious jewelry. It is your greedy wife who took it." Susan's accusation left everyone gasping, as she pointed directly at me as the culprit. Noah appeared shocked and somewhat embarrassed by his mother's words. Yet, I knew he trusted me implicitly and wouldn't entertain the idea for a moment that I'd stolen from his mom. Despite his love for his mother, his trust in me remained steadfast. "No, Mom, I don't think this is fair. You're throwing false accusations at Skyla. She would never do something like this. You must have misplaced it." No, Noah, you have to believe me. Remember how Skyla gushed about my heirloom jewelry? She knew I would never let her have it, so she stole it from me." "Mom, those are baseless accusations. Skyla was merely complimenting the design. She never once asked you to give her the necklace." "Noah, my poor child, you are blinded by love. You have to see how vile and greedy your wife is. She is the one who stole my jewelry. That's why she never asked to borrow it from me. She wanted it for herself." At this point, Noah and Susan engaged in a heated argument, while the rest of the guests watched in disbelief. It was deeply embarrassing to be accused of theft on my own anniversary, something I never anticipated. However, I resolved to handle the situation with dignity. "Susan, you have some nerve to make accusations about me in my own home. You think I'm a lowly thief who would go after your jewelry? You are dead wrong. I am above that. Don't try to act all innocent and angelic, Skyla. I know for a fact that you took my jewelry last night. I saw you going into my room and coming out of the bag. I didn't think anything of it since it's your house, but now it all makes sense. You were stealing my jewelry. Susan, you need to stop making baseless assumptions. You have no right to ruin my reputation without any evidence. Who knows what you did with your jewelry? Don't blame it on me. Okay then, if I'm lying, why don't we go and check your room? I am 100% positive that I will find my jewelry there. We have plenty of witnesses as well." "Noah, you cannot just invade our privacy like that. It's rude and disrespectful. Leave it be." At this point, I don't care, Noah. Your mom has taken it too far. If we don't allow it, everyone here will always doubt that I am a thief. It's a big allegation, Noah. Noah looked torn between his loyalty to his mother and his trust in me. While he understood his mother's frustration, he also recognized the severity of her accusations without evidence. It was clear that I needed to do everything possible to clear my name. So Noah relented and told his mom to go check our room. As we all went, people started looking around, including Susan, the woman who had stirred up this unnecessary drama. She went straight to my closet, pulled out the jewelry box, and exclaimed, "Look, Noah, I found my jewelry. It was in your wife's closet." I was right. She freaking stole my stuff because she is greedy and jealous. No, this is impossible. I know my wife wouldn't steal jewelry from you. I don't know how it got there. You didn't take it, right, Skyla? Of course I didn't, Noah. You know I'm not a thief. Oh, really, Skyla? Then how did my previous jewelry set end up in your closet? There is no way you can get out of this, Skyla. You should have confessed and given me my stuff back. I'm sorry, Noah, but I think I need to call the police. Noah stood there looking dumbfounded while Susan called the police. Whispers circulated around the room, and many couldn't believe what they were witnessing. It was peak humiliation for me, but I stayed composed, waiting for the police to arrive as Susan berated me, calling me names and saying awful things. She said, "Noah, this is it. I know you didn't believe me when I said that Skyla is a gold digger. I'm sure now you know that I was right. You need to get smart and divorce her. No one wants a thief in the family. She will get arrested by the cops now anyway." Mom, I don't think it was wise of you to call the cops. You may not like what happens next. What do you mean, Julia? I wasn't going to let Skyla get away with theft. People who commit crimes should be punished. There should be no room for mercy, or else they will get worse. I think Julia's right, Susan. You shouldn't have called the cops. This will only turn worse for you. But since you already called the cops, there's no going back. How will this turn worse for me when you are the one committing a crime? I would love to see that smug smile off your face. At that point, I started to laugh. Julia was smirking and shaking her head. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy, supposedly getting arrested, but I was laughing anyway. After calming down, I said, "Susan, I must say you had a brilliant plan in mind. It's truly remarkable how you carefully planned to trap me and make me look like a thief." "What do you mean? You are a thief since you stole my stuff." "Oh God, Mom, have some shame. You are really crossing all limits. We know that Skyla didn't steal your jewelry. It's all a trap you set to make her look guilty." Julia shocked everyone with that declaration. Susan looked a little nervous, but she wasn't giving up her plan. She acted innocent and clueless, saying, "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. Julia is the thief. Quit the act." "Susan, you thought that you could plan to trap me, and I wouldn't know. Julia told me everything. She told me you were going to accuse me of theft and trap me. I had known it before the party. How dare you say that? You are influencing my poor child and making her say things you have no proof of your claims, Mom." "We didn't have proof that you told me about your plan, but we do have a better way to prove what you did." "That's right. Now, to protect my reputation, I will tell you what proof I have. You called the cops, so I would have had to reveal this anyway." "What do you mean, Skyla? What proof are you talking about? Did you forget that we have cameras in the house?" Guys, the look on Susan's face was priceless. She turned as white as a ghost and started to shake a little. She had totally forgotten this fact. Maybe she assumed we only had cameras in the front yard. She may not have thought that the inside of my house also had cameras. Noah also suddenly remembered this, and he said, "That's right. Even I forgot about the cameras. We have cameras in the hallway with a clear view of every room from outside. We can check that for the true story." "Why would we do that, Noah? I'm your mom, and I'm telling you that Skyla stole from me. We don't have to prove my words. Why are you going back now?" "Mom, I thought you wanted to get to the bottom of this. I don't believe for a second that my wife is a thief. Even if you don't want to see the proof, I do. I need to see with my own eyes that she stole from you. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe it." Susan did her best to stop Noah from seeing the CCTV footage. I pulled out the saved footage on my phone, and we started to look through the videos. Meanwhile, the cops arrived and were given a brief rundown by everyone. Susan immediately went to them and said, "Officers, you need to arrest my daughter-in-law, Skylar. She stole my jewelry. We found it in her closet. She's a criminal. You need to arrest her now." "I don't think so, Susan. Officers, I have proof that my mother-in-law trapped me and is making false claims against me." "Mom, do you have solid proof against your mother-in-law?" "I do have solid proof. Actually, my home has cameras. This is the footage it recorded from yesterday. I handed my phone to the officers to see. Noah and the rest saw that footage later. The footage clearly showed that Susan took her jewelry box from her room and went into my room when I wasn't home. When she came out, she didn't have the box with her. It proved that Susan had put her jewelry box in my room on purpose. Everyone was shocked, and Noah straight up started to shout at Susan. Susan looked at him with fear in her eyes and actually started to cry. I had never seen Noah so angry. He said, "Mom, how could you do this to my wife? Skyla has been nothing but kind to you, and you backstab her like this. What is wrong with you?" "Noah, please let me explain." "No, just no. I don't want to hear anything from you, Mom. I'm done. I am so done with you. You tried to destroy my wife's life and reputation on our anniversary. I will never forgive that. I seriously cannot believe how low you stooped, Mom. God, I'm ashamed of having a mom like you. I don't think I want any contact with you from now on." "Julia, you are absolutely right in your decision. In fact, I have the same thing in mind. Mom, we are done. Don't ever come near me or my wife again. We will go no contact with you." Hearing that, Susan started to cry loudly. She clutched Noah's arm and tried to reason with Julia as well, begging them to forgive her. It was prophetic, and the guests were shaking their heads at Susan. Most of the guests were family, so they didn't hold back their criticisms against Susan. Not one person stood in her support. Finally, the cops told me, "Mom, do you know that you can file a report against your mother-in-law for these false accusations?" "Yes, I do know that, officer. Thanks for reminding me, though. So, would you like to go ahead and press charges?" "I would suggest you do that. We will arrest her now and get her out of your way. I see you have a party to host." "Yes, officers, I would like to press charges. Please arrest her and accept my apology for this drama." "Noah, you don't mind, do you?" "Absolutely not, Skyla. What Mom did was horribly wrong. You should be pressing charges. I give you my full support." Suddenly, it was all too much for our dear Susan. The cops descended on her and began handcuffing her while she struggled. They warned her that they could charge her for resisting arrest. But Susan wasn't in her right mind. She screamed and cried while begging Noah, Julie, and even me for forgiveness. "Skyla, please don't do this to me. I'm your mother-in-law. What will people say when they see me get arrested? You didn't care when you called the cops on me, now did you? Why should I care? I'm right to get you arrested. You have wronged me. I'm sorry, Skyla. I shouldn't have done this. Look, we're family. We can solve this between ourselves. There is no need to get the cops involved now." "Now, Susan, I distinctly remember you saying that criminals should not be spared, or else they will get worse. Seeing that you can easily evolve into a menace to this society, I absolutely have a duty as a concerned citizen to get you arrested." Susan looked shocked when I threw her words back at her. She also kept crying and mumbling apologies while everyone criticized her. The cops didn't waste much time and took her away. Noah and I went with them to the police station to file a report. Meanwhile, Julie stayed behind to tend to the guests. After Noah and I got to the police station, we filed an official report. I was going to sue her for good. She had done enough damage in my life and escalated badly. But still, I wanted Noah to be completely on board with me too. "Noah, are you sure you're okay with this? If you're not comfortable with a police report, we can always go back." "No, Skyla, we're not going back without a police report. We need to do this now. I have failed to protect you from my mom. She was about to destroy your life. I can't put this past me. You know that I didn't doubt you for a second, right?" "I know, Noah. Your mom being a psycho is not your fault. It's completely on her." Noah felt very guilty for not being able to protect me better. I understood his pain. He did love his mom very much. It's difficult to know that the woman who gave birth to you is an evil woman. But he still gave me the go-ahead to file the report, and so I did. He also promised never to let Susan back in our lives. We agreed to go to couples counseling to get a better grip on our marriage. Noah and I did return to the party, and we decided to continue with the celebration. The food was there, the people were there, and we were surrounded by supportive family and friends. We had no reason to just discard everything for one person. It was our anniversary after all. So, we resumed the celebrations and had a blast. Julia also had a great time too. All this while, my dear mother-in-law Susan was rotting in jail. So Susan didn't want the case to go to court after all. She made a settlement with my lawyer. I got a decent chunk of money while she got away with what she did. I really hope she changes her behavior after that. I say I hope because we are no longer in contact with Susan. Noah, me, and Julia all cut her off, as did some of her family members. The others simply don't entertain her anymore, but didn't block her straight away. I mean, who knows when she would fancy trapping other family members out of spite. Anyway, since we cut contact with Susan, my marriage improved a lot. The couple's counseling helped as well. We are currently expecting our first child and plan to keep our dear son away from Susan too. Hello, I'm Pearl, 29 years old, and I've recently welcomed a new addition to the family. However, the birthing process was anything but smooth, thanks to my mother-in-law nearly causing me harm. I may sound a bit crazy, but allow me to share the tale. Let me start by giving you some background on my husband, Adrian. We met in college and instantly clicked, falling in love almost immediately. Our connection was extraordinary, and I knew he was the one. After graduation, we moved in together, and while I had no complaints about Adrian, his mother Becky was a different story. Adrian and his family, originally from Missouri, moved to my state when he was 12. With their charming Southern accents and unique customs, I attributed Becky's mistreatment of me to cultural differences. She disapproved of me taking her son away and resented the fact that the rest of Adrian's family adored me. Without any specific reason, I became the target of her disdain. Despite her constant snide remarks and belittling of my achievements, Adrian stood by my side, putting a stop to her behavior. After 7 years of dating, we decided to tie the knot in a small, intimate ceremony. Although Becky tried to cause trouble, we quickly quashed it by making it clear that she needed to behave or face consequences. Married life only strengthened my bond with Adrian's family. Whenever his relatives visited, they chose to stay with us instead of a hotel, much to Becky's displeasure. She continued her attempts to sabotage me, but the support I received from others remained unwavering. Eventually, Adrian's relatives refused to interact with Becky without our presence, as they discovered she treated them just as poorly as she treated me. After 3 years of marriage, I began experiencing unusual abdominal pains. Brushing it off initially, I decided to get it checked, only to discover I was 4 months pregnant. The news was surprising, considering I hadn't shown any visible signs of pregnancy. Excited to share the news with Adrian upon his return home, little did I know the challenges that lay ahead. I prepared a lavish dinner and uncorked a fine bottle of wine. "Welcome home, sweetie," I exclaimed, catching my partner off guard. Curious, they questioned the extravagant setup. "What's with the fancy dinner? Why don't you sit down first?" I gestured for them to take a seat. "I have some news to share with you." "Okay, should I be worried?" I reassured them. "Absolutely not. In fact, I think you're going to be really happy." "All right, I'm excited." Spill. "So, you know how I've been experiencing those weird stomach pains?" I began. "Well, I went to the doctor today, and she ran some tests. Turns out my stomach is perfectly normal." Their curiosity piqued, they asked, "What was it then?" "Turns out I'm pregnant," I revealed. "Oh my gosh, are you serious?" they exclaimed, surprised. "The best part is that I'm 4 months along." They were incredulous, asking, "How is that even possible?" "It's a hidden pregnancy. I haven't had any other symptoms, and those pains were actually kicks," I explained. Overwhelmed, they responded, "Oh my God, this is big news. I'm so happy." "I am too. And this couldn't be happening at a better time. We're finally doing well financially, and I was going to ask you if we could start trying anyway," I shared. Concerned about announcing the news, they expressed, "Oh, we're going to have to tell everyone about that. I'm worried about the way your mother is going to react." Acknowledging the tension with my mother-in-law, I replied, "You know how much she hates me. She hates that everyone loves me. I'm worried that with the pregnancy announcement, I'm going to get more attention and she'll hate me even more." Determined to address the issue, my partner reassured me, "If you're okay with it, I'll have a strong word with her about her behavior. You don't have to worry about a thing. The only thing you have to do is enjoy being treated like a princess." Heartened by their support, I agreed. I would like that talk and the princess treatment. I say we wait until we find out the gender of the baby before we have a celebration, though. They embraced the idea, saying, "I love that idea. Now, let's have a little celebration of our own." Eugene and I were elated with the pregnancy news, and though we hadn't made concrete plans, we had set aside some savings for the eventual arrival of kids. A month later, we shared the joyous news with our families. While my family was overjoyed, Adrian's family, except for Becky, reacted positively. Surprisingly, she barely reacted, scowling at us. Deciding to have a gender reveal party, we organized a backyard barbecue and invited both our families. Using the traditional cake-cutting method, we discovered we were expecting a boy. I was elated and eager to start decorating our nursery after the gender reveal party. Throughout the entire celebration, I felt like a queen, receiving abundant attention and numerous questions. However, my joy took a turn when I noticed Becky's absence. After some inquiry, I discovered she was in the house, prompting me to seek her out. Inside our home, I found her at the top of the stairs. Puzzled, I asked, "Becky, what are you doing here?" "The party's downstairs." Her response shocked me. "Oh, I'm just trying to find proof." "Proof of what?" "Of your lies." Surprised, I retorted, "Excuse me, what lies?" "Come on now, ain't nobody believing that you got a baby in there. Are you trying to tell me that you think my pregnancy is fake?" "Of course. You're too tiny to be 7 months pregnant. There ain't no child in there," she declared dismissively. Defending myself, I explained, "Every woman experiences pregnancy differently. Just because I'm not as big as I'm supposed to be doesn't mean I'm not pregnant. Don't you dare lie. You just want everyone's attention." Why would I fake a whole pregnancy just to get attention? And why would I want attention in the first place? I know your kind. You're jealous that my son pays me all the attention when I come over, and you want to take that away. Feeling unfairly accused, I responded, "Becky, I think you're projecting some of your feelings onto me, and I really don't appreciate that. I have no need for attention because I naturally get it. You're trying to steal from me, and I do not appreciate that." Exasperated, I warned her, "Look, you're stressing me out, and that is not good for the baby. I'm just going to go. Stop trying to steal the spotlight. No one gives a darn about you." The last thing I remember was her pushing me down the stairs, resulting in excruciating pain. When I woke up in a hospital bed with a tube in my hand and abdominal pain, I was disoriented. Eugene, sitting beside me, explained that I had fallen down the stairs and lost a lot of blood. They had to induce my pregnancy, and I had given birth. Desperate to know about my baby, Eugene hesitated, saying they were doing everything to stabilize our child, but he couldn't provide further details. "Where is he? I need to see him." "He's in the ICU, and I assure you he's in good hands. You have nothing to worry about. There's nothing more you can do. Don't blame yourself for anything. Once we get a donor for you, we can focus on our child, okay?" "Yeah, but I'm not blaming myself." "Good. I have someone else to blame." "What do you mean?" "I'll let you know, but could you please bring your mother down here?" "Why? Just please don't ask questions. I'm going through enough. Bring her here and tell her everything that happened in front of me. I'll explain everything else after." "Okay, but first let's get you your blood, and then we'll do everything else that you wanted." "Yeah, okay." Eugene went to talk to my doctor, and thankfully they had found a donor who was willing to donate immediately for me. The stress of everything made me fall right back asleep after the blood transfusion. I had so many emotions swirling through me, and I didn't know what to make of them. On one hand, I was grateful that my son was still alive, but I also knew that he might grow up with some developmental issues. I didn't have a problem with that, but the fact that Becky would be the reason that my son struggled made me feel hot with anger. I was asleep for a good 3 hours, and when I woke up, I felt much better. Once again, Eugene was next to me and immediately rushed to my side when I woke up. Hi, sweetie. You fell asleep for a little while. How do you feel right now? A lot better. How's our son? They've managed to stabilize him. He'll have to be in the NICU for the next 2 months. Will I be able to hold him? Not yet, but soon. I promise. Until then, we will definitely get to see him. I saw him, and he looks adorable. All right. I'm glad that everything's okay. But you wanted to see my mom, right? Oh yeah. Is she here? She's waiting outside. Shall I bring her in? Yeah. Hi, Pearl. How are you? Not doing so good, Mom. Eugene, did you update her on what happened? No, he didn't tell me anything. He just asked me to rush here. Eugene, could you tell her what happened since I got here? Well, Mom, after you came running to us about Pearl slipping down the stairs, she ended up bleeding a lot. She had to get induced so she could give birth to the baby. Thankfully, the doctors and nurses managed to stabilize our son. He's just going to be in the NICU for a while now. Oh, you gave birth, Pearl. Congratulations. Don't even. Do you have something to say to me and Eugene? What are you talking about? Sweetie, you said Becky came running to you after I slipped, right? Yes, and I'm so grateful that she saw it because none of us heard you fall. Great. Now, Becky, should I be the one to tell him, or will you do it yourself? What is she talking about, Mom? Oh, I don't know. She just gave birth. She's probably just making things up. She's probably suffering from mommy brain. Lord knows I had a bad case of it after I gave birth to you. Do not even try to make this into something as arbitrary as that, Eugene. Your mother pushed me down the stairs. What? You remember? I was overcome with emotion when I finally cradled my son, and Eugene shared in my tears. The realization that we had almost lost him left me feeling nauseous. Word spread that our son was back home, and somehow, even Becky got wind of it. She acquired another phone number just to reach out to us. Seeing that our responses were non-existent, she took it upon herself to show up unannounced at our house. Fortunately, Eugene answered the door. If I had, I might have given her a piece of my mind, or worse, physically confronted her for the stress she had caused my family. Becky looked worn and aged compared to our last encounter, tears in her eyes as she pleaded with Eugene to talk to her. Please, talk to me, Mom. You need to stop trying to contact us. How can I not? My son won't talk to me, and I don't get to see my grandson. You think you get to see our son? You don't think we're in pain from not being able to hold our little boy? I really am sorry. Please, at least talk to me. I thought I was doing something right. How is pushing my wife down a flight of stairs the right thing to do? She's always been trying to steal everyone's attention. I see the way she tries so hard, and it's just so darn hard to keep my anger in check. You have no idea how insane you sound right now. I do not. I was trying to do what was best for you. Best for me? How is this best for me? I always knew you could do so much better than Pearl. I was just trying to get you to see that by almost killing my child and wife. Are you kidding me right now? What you did was not done for me, but because you couldn't handle the fact that there was someone better than you in your family. Pearl is not better than me. Oh, she is in every way. She cooks better food and has a much better temperament than you. Why do you think more of our family has started coming over to our place for Thanksgiving when we host? Nobody can stand you and your entitlement. You take that back right this second. That is no way to speak to your mother. No, I will speak to you the way you deserve to be spoken to. You made our lives a nightmare from the start, and I have been silent about it only because Pearl begged me not to damage my relationship with you. Okay, I get it. I'm a horrible mother. You are. You absolutely are. You're lucky that we're not going to the police about you hurting Pearl and our son. Oh, please. Like if you have evidence of it, it'll be my word against hers. Who said we didn't have evidence? Don't try and bluff me right now. Look, Pearl and I are exhausted, and we want this time to be as calm as possible. So, for the foreseeable future, I do not want to hear from or see you again. Do you get it? You can't do that. I want to see my grandson too. Oh, you are never seeing your grandson. What? You have no idea how much our son is going to suffer thanks to your jealousy. The least I could do is make sure that he never meets the source of his problem. I will fight for my grandparents' rights. Go for it. Bye. Eugene was furious that Becky still had the audacity to even show up. If it were me in her place, I would never have shown my face to my family. But hey, everyone's different, I guess. Becky did not give up on trying to contact us. Not only would she call and text us a whole bunch of times, but she would also show up at our doorstep and make a huge ruckus until we opened the door. So Eugene and I did the only sensible thing and got a restraining order against Becky. She once again did not like that, but I was so tired by this point that I really did not care. Thankfully, Eugene and I dealt with Becky just in time for us to take our son home. Let me tell you, holding him for the first time made me sob and feel so grateful that he was still alive. Eugene and I decided to use the next few months to just bond with our child. So we didn't let anyone come over to see the baby. Thankfully, after everything that happened, everyone was happy to comply. Becky, however, did not stop trying to bother us. One day, we actually received a summons to come to court because Becky was trying to fight for her grandparents' rights. That threw me into a blind rage. I couldn't believe that she was actually trying to claim grandparent rights when she almost killed me and the grandson she so desperately wanted to see. I asked Eugene to gather the evidence and made our way to a lawyer's firm. We hired a good lawyer, showed him the evidence, and he told us that we could charge Becky, even though we didn't want to do it earlier. After dealing with her harassment for months, we decided to press charges against her. The trial that followed was truly something out of a movie. Becky cried and sobbed at first because we were neglecting her and not letting her visit her only grandson. I could tell that the jury was a little sympathetic towards her, but I knew I had the most incriminating piece of evidence for her. When the footage of her pushing me down the stairs played, everyone in the room went silent, and Becky grew pale. After the first hearing, Becky blasted us with calls and texts, accusing us of hiding the truth from her. We figured it was in the best interest that we blocked her. After a couple of weeks, Becky was charged with attempted murder of an unborn child and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. All her appeals were denied, and Eugene and I couldn't have been happier. Of course, word got around in Eugene's family as well about what Becky had done, and let's just say that nobody wants anything to do with her anymore. She's going to have a tough time when she's done with her sentence. As for Eugene and me, we're gradually getting used to being first-time parents, and we're loving every second of it. I'm just glad we get to do it stress-free. We were considering moving, but that's a decision to make for a later time. Thank you so much for listening. A sense of futility permeated my role as Alex's wife, as the resonance of his demanding voice cut through the clatter of dishes like a sharp knife. "Era, bring me some tea now," he commanded, impatience evident in his incredulous tone. My hand, immersed in soapy water, hesitated. "Hold on, I'm doing the dishes," I responded. His disdainful interruption came swiftly. "Stop that and bring me the tea quickly. Can't you follow simple orders?" I started to explain, only to be met with a harsh verdict. "What a useless wife you are. Make me some sweet coffee, please." Mrs. Whitmore, my mother-in-law, voiced her opinion from the living room, devouring a slice of cake taken from the fridge, her eyes gleaming with malice. A sigh escaped me as I glanced at the towering pile of dishes. "There are so many. Leave them for later. Just do what we say, useless wife." Alex's voice lashed out like a whip, each word stinging. I, Era, a 28-year-old working mother, found myself ensnared in a life that resembled more of a prison than a home. Married at 23, my hope for love and companionship had given way to the overbearing presence of Alex and his demanding mother. Our 4-year-old son remained the sole source of joy in my bleak world. Living in Alex's parents' house, a decision forced upon me after my father-in-law's passing, felt like a perpetual struggle. Initially sympathizing with Mrs. Whitmore's supposed grief, it soon became apparent that I was nothing more than a pawn in her cruel game of domestic tyranny. Cooking, cleaning, working, my efforts were never enough. Meals were either left untouched or criticized harshly. "The stir-fry is so half-hearted," Mrs. Whitmore would scoff. "I'm busy and can only make simple things," I'd respond, attempting to keep my voice steady. "That's why I hate backtalk from a daughter-in-law," she'd snap. Their cruelty escalated over time, shifting from harsh words to a chilling silence, ignoring me entirely as if I were a ghost haunting my own home. 5 suffocating years passed, and as Alex and I turned 35 and 33 respectively, the oppressive atmosphere remained unchanged. My mother-in-law, now 63, seemed to thrive on my misery. One evening, as I trudged home from work, a heavy realization settled over me. My existence seemed pointless in their eyes, a shadow unseen and unheard. The only voice that acknowledged me was that of my son, and the thought of losing even that small recognition became unbearable as I returned home. I initiated the cooking process immediately, attempting to push away the gloom that had settled in. I prepared mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and pork, hoping to infuse some semblance of normalcy into our dinner. "Bring me the mayo," Alex abruptly commanded, breaking his long silence. "Sure, here you are," I replied, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in ages were not of gratitude or conversation, but a mere order. It proved to be the final straw, the breaking point of my patience and tolerance. The evening took a turn for the worse when Mrs. Whitmore demanded, "Clean the toilet." "What now?" I gasped. "Yes, now," she insisted, her voice dripping with venom. Unable to contain my frustration, I snapped back. "Don't say such a thing while we're eating. It's nasty, just like your heart," she hissed. Our argument escalated quickly, with Alex interjecting, demanding I apologize to his mother. However, I refused, standing my ground for the first time in years. The conflict reached its peak, and in that moment, a decision crystallized within me. I needed to escape this toxic environment, not just for my sake, but for my son's as well. Retreating to my room, my resolve hardened. I downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and slammed them in front of Alex. His shock was palpable, but I felt nothing but a cold determination. "I'm filing these," I declared, my voice steady. Facing my husband's bewildered expression, I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadows. It was time to reclaim my life. The days following my declaration of divorce were a whirlwind of cold glares and biting remarks. However, amidst this storm, I found an unfamiliar sense of liberation. One evening, as I served dinner, Mrs. Whitmore looked at the meal with disdain. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better," she remarked. Biting my tongue, I focused on my son's smiling face, and Alex chimed in sarcastically, "Oh, playing the perfect mother now, are we? What a joke." I sensed the anger simmering within me, yet I maintained my composure. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son," I stated calmly. Mrs. Whitmore snorted dismissively, saying, "Don't act high and mighty. You're just a burden in this house." The tension at the table became palpable, with Alex's attempts to belittle me only intensifying. "So, Era, have you thought about how you'll survive after the divorce? You can barely keep a house, let alone your own life," Alex remarked. I looked him straight in the eye, asserting, "I have been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son." His smirk faded slightly, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Mrs. Whitmore quickly intervened, saying, "Don't be absurd. You need us more than we need you." The conversation turned to finances, a topic they usually avoided. "You do realize that without my salary, this household would crumble," I stated, more to myself than to them. Mrs. Whitmore scoffed, claiming, "We'll manage. We don't need your pity money." However, Alex's silence spoke volumes. He knew the truth. Without my income, they would be in dire straits. In the following days, their behavior became increasingly erratic. Mrs. Whitmore oscillated between trying to sweet-talk me into staying and hurling insults when I didn't comply. Alex, on the other hand, seemed lost, his arrogant facade crumbling as the reality of his financial dependence became undeniable. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between them that chilled me to the bone. "She can't leave us like this," Alex hissed. "We need her money." Mrs. Whitmore's reply was cold and calculated. "Don't worry. I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable she won't dare to leave." Hearing their true intentions laid bare was a revelation. They didn't care about me or our son. It was all about control and money. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan began to form in my mind. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one, but it wouldn't be fought with words or petty arguments. I would get them where it hurt the most: their pride and their pockets. The next morning, I started putting my plan into action. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp and renowned woman. "I want a divorce, and I want to make sure they don't get a penny more than they deserve," I told her. She nodded, her eyes glinting with determination. "We'll make sure of that. You've been the sole breadwinner, right? We'll use that." As the days passed, my resolve only grew stronger. I embarked on the task of documenting everything: the insults, the financial manipulation, even the smallest grievances. It was time to turn the tables, time for them to face the consequences of their actions. As I built my case, a sense of empowerment filled me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. The shadows of discontent were slowly lifting, and in their place, a new dawn was emerging. As the divorce proceedings began, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly toxic. Yet with each passing day, my sense of fear diminished, replaced by a steely resolve. One evening, Mrs. Whitmore tried a different tactic. "Alara, dear, why don't we forget all this nasty business?" You know we're family, her words dripped with insincerity. I met her gaze unwaveringly. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me," I responded. Alex, who had been quietly observing, scoffed. "Oh, playing the victim now. You're not as innocent as you pretend to be." I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice calm. "I'm not playing anything, Alex. I'm just no longer willing to be your scapegoat." The conversation turned, as it often did, to finances. "You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him?" Alex challenged. I smiled, a small, confident curve of my lips. "I've been supporting this family for years. I think I can manage." Mrs. Whitmore's expression twisted into a sneer. "You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back." Their words no longer held power over me. I knew my worth, and I knew the truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She laid out the strategy clearly. "We'll expose their financial dependency on you. It will play a crucial role in the custody battle and the division of assets." I nodded, feeling a sense of vindication. The law was on my side, and I was ready to fight back. At home, the tension reached a boiling point. Mrs. Whitmore's attempts to undermine me became more desperate. "You think you're so smart," she spat one evening, "but you're just a cold-hearted woman abandoning your family." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, I'm a woman who's finally standing up for herself." "I'm done," I declared. Alex jumped in, his voice laced with venom. "You'll regret this. You can't survive without me." However, his threats fell on deaf ears. I was done being intimidated. As the days went by, my preparations for the court battle intensified. I gathered financial statements, recorded their abusive remarks, and collected evidence of their negligence. One afternoon, as I was organizing my documents, my son came to me. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" His voice was small, uncertain. I pulled him into a hug, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place, and we're going to start a new, happy life. Just you and me." His arms tightened around me, and in that moment, I knew I was making the right decision. I was fighting not just for myself, but for my son's future. The day of the court hearing loomed closer, and with it, a sense of impending freedom. I was ready to face Alex and Mrs. Whitmore, ready to end their reign of control and emotional abuse. I was determined to reclaim my life and give my son the peace and happiness he deserved. It was time for justice, and I was determined to see it served. The day of the court hearing arrived, a day I had been anticipating with a mix of dread and determination. As I sat across from Alex and Mrs. Whitmore in the courtroom, I felt a sense of surrealism. This was the moment where everything would change. The proceedings began with a cold formality. Alex's lawyer portrayed him as a devoted husband and father struggling under the weight of false accusations. Mrs. Whitmore played the part of the grieving mother-in-law wronged by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. However, their performance was transparent, their lies brittle. When my turn came, I spoke clearly, my voice steady. I have been the sole provider for this family for years. My husband's employment and his mother's manipulation have been constant sources of strain. Alex interjected, his voice laced with false hurt. Alara, how can you say these things? I've always supported you. I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. Support is more than just words, Alex. It's about actions, and your actions have shown nothing but selfishness and cruelty. The judge listened intently as I presented my evidence. Financial statements, recordings of their verbal abuse, and testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. The truth was undeniable, and as the evidence mounted, Alex's facade began to crumble. Mrs. Whitmore's composure cracked, her mask of innocence slipping away. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. Then came the revelation that sealed their fate. My lawyer presented photographs and documents proving Alex's infidelity and Mrs. Whitmore's illicit affair with a wealthy neighbor, Mr. Harwood. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the images were displayed, showing them in compromising positions. Their deception was laid bare for all to see. Alex's face turned ashen, his eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Whitmore's expression twisted into one of fury, her hands trembling. You invaded our privacy. Mrs. Whitmore shrieked, her voice shrill. I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. No, I exposed the truth, a truth that you both have been hiding for too long. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Their credibility was shattered, their lies exposed in the harsh light of the courtroom. As the hearing came to a close, the judge's verdict was clear. I was granted full custody of our son, and a fair division of assets was ordered. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were left with little more than their shattered reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The years of manipulation and emotional abuse were finally over. I had stood up to my oppressors and emerged victorious. The sweetest moment came when my son ran into my arms outside the courthouse, his face bright with relief and happiness. We did it, Mom, he said, his voice filled with joy. Yes, we did, I replied, holding him close. We're free now. It's just the beginning for us. As we walked away hand in hand, I knew that this was not just a victory for me. It was a victory for every person who had ever been made to feel small, powerless, or unworthy. It was a victory for truth and justice, the start of a new chapter filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. The aftermath of the court ruling was immediate and tumultuous. Word of Alex and Mrs. Whitmore's deceit spread like wildfire, tarnishing their reputations in our small community. They were no longer able to hide behind their facade of respectability. In the days following the verdict, societal judgment and consequences awaited them. I concentrated on rebuilding my life with my son, finding solace in the satisfaction that Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were facing the consequences of their actions. One evening, as I prepared dinner, I received an unexpected visitor, Mrs. Harwood, the wife of Mr. Harwood, with tearful eyes. Alara, I heard about everything. I can't believe what Sylvia, Mrs. Whitmore, did. Her voice broke, and the pain etched on her face was evident. Inviting her in, I offered a cup of tea, and as we sat at the kitchen table, she poured out her heart. I trusted her as a neighbor, as a friend, and to think she was having an affair with my husband, she said. I listened, offering words of comfort. It was clear that Mrs. Whitmore's actions had caused more damage than she had ever anticipated. The next day, I encountered Alex in town. He was a mere shadow of the man he once was, his arrogance replaced by a look of defeat. "Alara, please, can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I stopped, facing him. "What is there to talk about, Alex?" He fidgeted, unable to meet my eyes. "I am sorry for everything. I didn't realize how much I depended on you, on your strength." His apology, though late, was a testament to the shift in power. He had lost everything: his dignity, his home, his family. In that loss, he had finally recognized his own faults. However, it was Mrs. Whitmore who faced the harshest backlash. Her affair with Mr. Harwood had not only ruined her reputation, but had also led to legal troubles. Mrs. Harwood had filed for divorce and was pursuing a lawsuit against her for alienation of affection. I heard about Mrs. Whitmore's plight from neighbors, the whispers and rumors painting a picture of a woman undone by her actions. She had become an outcast, shunned by those she had once considered friends. One afternoon at the grocery store, our paths crossed, and for a moment, our eyes met. The look of resentment and defeat in her eyes was unmistakable. "You did this to me," she hissed under her breath as she passed by. I watched her go, feeling a mix of pity and vindication. "No, Sylvia, you did this to yourself," I whispered to myself. The tides of justice had turned, and the consequences of their actions were now inescapable. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were living a life they had crafted through years of deceit and manipulation, and as I watched them struggle with the aftermath, I knew that the best revenge was living well, free from their toxic influence. Turning my focus back to my son and our new life, I realized that this was not just a story of revenge. It was a story of liberation. It was about breaking free from the chains of abuse and control. As I looked to the future, I knew that the best was yet to come.
You overheard our conversation yesterday, didn't you? My eldest son and his wife are returning home for the birth of their child. So, I need you to clear your stuff up to the yard. Excuse me, but you can't have kids anyway. You'll even help with my son's work. The least you could do is make some room. I'm paying $10,000 in rent, and this is getting too tiresome to deal with. I've been living with my mother-in-law, but now she wants me out of the house because my brother-in-law and his wife are returning. Between my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, his wife, and my husband, this house is full of problems. I've been trying to keep things running smoothly, but it's becoming a hassle to think about it all. I'm done thinking. Okay, I'll leave, but I can't just put my belongings in the yard. So I'll come back later to pick them up. You're leaving? Thank you, that's a big help. Ignoring my pleas, my mother-in-law, I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called the junk removal service. Once I stopped thinking, no one could stop my actions. I'm Linda, a 40-year-old IT consultant. My husband, Mark, is also 40 and runs 3 restaurants as a sole proprietor. We're both 40 and people often assume we've been married a long time and have a kid or two, but we're actually newlyweds. We both live as workaholics and didn't marry until this age. I had given up on marriage just before turning 40, but a random visit to a bar after work changed my mind. "This your first time here?" Mark asked. "Yes, that's right," I replied. Feeling comfortable in Mark's restaurant, I started visiting frequently as a regular. I always sat at the end of the bar, and it became normal for Mark to chat with me while I ate. "What does an IT consultant do?" Mark asked. "Introducing it to companies, strategic planning. I've worked with restaurants too. Once I suggested a tablet-based ordering system to reduce labor costs and improve efficiency," I replied. Slowly, I was drawn to his dedication to his work, and likewise, Mark grew fond of me, seeing that I was a hard-working person. "I'm always busy with work and can't talk much. How about we go out for dinner sometime?" Mark suggested. Excited about the chance to dine with a restaurateur, I eagerly agreed. We started dating, and 2 years later, as we both turned 40, we decided to get married. Feeling shy about being a bride at 40, I asked my husband to skip the wedding ceremony and we just took some photos of us dressed up. After we got married, I moved from my apartment to my husband's house, a 3-story building with a garden and parking located in a high-end area. The rent is apparently around $10,000. Some might think it's unthinkable to live with a mother-in-law right after getting married, but I'm 40, so I don't mind much. Plus, my mother-in-law is 70 and my father-in-law has passed away, so living together seemed necessary when my husband suggested it. I immediately agreed, but after moving in with my mother-in-law, I regretted accepting so quickly. When I moved into my husband's house, besides the bedroom for us, I even got a lavish office room for myself. His house seemed too big for just 2 people, with many spare rooms. Once I settled in, I asked my husband a simple question. Why do we need such a big house just for you and your mother? I have a brother 3 years older than me. He left home after college, and I've lost touch with him for the most part. He hasn't been home at all, and it's been a few years since I've heard from him. He's such a man that one day he might get into trouble and come back to me and Mom, right? So we decided to rent a bigger house, my husband explained. I think it's a little too big, I said. Well, I got married, and you came, so I guess it all worked out, my husband said with a smile as he unboxed my books and arranged them on the shelf. He talked about his brother Daniel from his story. It seems Daniel is aimlessly hopping from job to job, but my husband doesn't think badly of him. Don't talk about that kid. What if he really comes back? My mother-in-law appeared at the doorway of what would be my office, seemingly checking on us. It appears she doesn't have a good opinion of him, unlike my husband. It's understandable for a mother to show a cold reaction to an eldest son who shirks his responsibilities. However, I'm worried that my husband and my mother-in-law might clash over his brother someday. Also, I'm not too fond of you either, Mom. Come on, we're going to live together now, so stop saying things like that, I said. I'm not saying you should leave. I just need to make things clear from the start. My mother-in-law walked away, her slippers making a padding sound. I'm sorry, I'll talk to her, my husband said. It's okay. I got a similar talk when we met for the wedding. I'll build a relationship with your mother as we live together, I replied. I took a book from my husband's paused hands and placed it on the shelf. It seems she doesn't like my age. I'm 40, so it's not impossible to have children, but I guess it's a challenging thought. Also, Mark's elder brother Daniel is not married and has no children, so there's a high chance that my mother-in-law won't get to see her grandchildren. That's why she's disappointed and wishes Mark had married someone younger. To her, Daniel, who doesn't fulfill his role as the eldest son, and I, who can't fulfill my role as a wife in her eyes, are probably the same. I understand her feelings, but I can't turn back the clock on my body, so there's nothing I can do about that one. Once the move was completely finished, and our married life officially began, my mother-in-law's coldness towards me became evident. She ignored or avoided me when I spoke and tried to have as little to do with me as possible. It's a bit lonely, but since there's no harassment or physical violence, I guess I should consider it okay for now. I can build a relationship with her over time, but more pressing is my concern for Mark. Are you okay with your work? I asked him. No, it's pretty bad. I need to take action soon, but it's tough to arrange the finances, Mark replied, sitting at the dining table with his head in his hands. I stopped doing the dishes and sat down in front of him to listen. These are tough times. Prices are soaring, expenses climbing, and customers are tightening their wallets. There's no end in sight if this keeps up. We might have to close another one of our stores, Mark continued, about a year into our marriage. The situation at Mark's restaurants worsened. One of the 3 stores had already closed, and it seemed another might have to shut down too. Seeing Mark's troubled face made me feel distressed, but my mother-in-law seemed unaffected by these troubles. You're Mark's wife, but you don't help out at the store. You just do your own job. Can you really say you're fulfilling your role as a wife? My mother-in-law's voice pierced through the air from the living room as she overheard our conversation. I wondered what she was thinking, but she has her own way of seeing things. Mark has been running his own restaurant for nearly 10 years, overcoming various challenges. I believe he'll pull through this time too. You, his wife, shouldn't be making that face. Are you trying to feed into his anxiety and make him fail? What a terrible wife, she shouted again, her words filled with spite and venom. I knew she wasn't just trying to fire me up, but she wasn't entirely wrong. I took her words positively and decided to support Mark to the fullest, smiling reassuringly at my anxious husband. A year later, just as she said, Mark managed to turn this situation around and avoided closing a second store. See, I told you, I said to my mother-in-law. A stupid wife who can't even trust her husband. Don't drag Mark down, she replied, lashing out at me without reservation. The relationship with her might seem to have worsened, but since Mark's business is doing well, I'll consider it a break-even situation. I thought things were balancing out, but it turned out to be a clear negative for me. Mark. Daniel called for my brother, my mother-in-law suddenly said. Yes, Daniel's girlfriend is pregnant. That's great news. She's a 32-year-old who worked at the same bar as Mark. They asked. Something. Why are you being so formal all of a sudden? I asked. Daniel is a freelancer and so is his pregnant girlfriend. With a baby on the way, they're struggling. They asked if they could move into this house and if they could work at your restaurant, my mother-in-law explained. I was contemplating how to confront Mark about the affair from the dining room when my mother-in-law came into the living room and started talking to him. The conversation was about Daniel, whom I've never met, and I was completely left out as they continued talking. It was a strange scene. She used to dislike Daniel for not fulfilling his role as the eldest son, yet now she was asking Mark to welcome him. The reason was simple, the grandchild. She had given up hope of seeing a grandchild, but now saw an opportunity and completely changed her stance. She was even planning to offer them a home and jobs. Ah, okay. Mark finally replied, looking back at me with a clearly troubled expression. Come on, it's a good thing. Daniel is in trouble and you, Mark, have the means to help him, my mother-in-law said. I felt a sense of unease. Is it not odd to have Daniel and his family move in? I looked at Mark in the living room from the dining area, and he seemed to share my concern. But with my mother-in-law's sudden decision, it seemed we were both in for some unexpected changes. I grappled with Mark's inability to say no to his mother. I had hoped he would stand up to her, but it seems it was just wishful thinking. He kept glancing at me, probably worried about my reaction. The worsening relationship with my mother-in-law, Mark's affair, now living with Daniel and his family, the problems just kept piling up. Overwhelmed and not knowing where to start, I decided to abandon thinking for today and just go to sleep. The next day being a holiday and probably due to extreme mental fatigue, I slept in until late morning. Mark was at work, so it was just my mother-in-law and me at home. Dreading what she might say about my sleeping in, I reluctantly headed to the living room. You sure slept in. Must be nice to have such leisure, she said, surpassing my expectations. You heard Mark and me talking yesterday, right? Daniel and his wife are coming back for a maternity leave visit, so move your stuff out to the yard. Excuse me, I was still groggy from sleep. Did she really mean I should live in the yard? Or was she telling me to leave the house? You can't have kids anyway. You don't help with Mark's work, so you should at least make room for Daniel and his family. We have 2 spare rooms left, so if you leave and your office is free, we can have a bedroom and a nursery for Daniel's family and a storage room for their stuff. Don't you think the room count and usage are just perfect? It seems she was indeed telling me to leave, but a storage room for Daniel's family. I'm being kicked out to make room for a space that doesn't seem necessary. Originally, I was allowed to use the office because there were spare rooms, and I don't mind if it's gone. A bedroom for Mark and me is enough. Daniel's family can live here without me leaving. Realizing that my mother-in-law now sees no reason for me to be in this house as a wife since she can see her grandchild and I'm paying $10,000 in rent, I'm too tired to deal with all this. I decided to clear my mind and give my brain a rest. Silent with my mother-in-law, the only sound in the living room was the ticking of the clock. Okay, time to leave, I said, having rested my mind. I decided it's too much trouble to worry about what happens to Mark, my mother-in-law, Daniel's family, and their future. Understood. I'll leave. I can't put all my belongings in the yard, so I'll come back later to pick them up, I declared. You're leaving? Thank you, that helps, my pleased mother-in-law said, ignoring my words. I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called a junk removal service. My decision, made after stopping my overthinking, couldn't be stopped by anyone. Let them all regret this choice later. Having left the house, I decided to stay at a hotel for the time being. I had called the junk removal service, but they needed some time to prepare. This worked out since I wanted some time too. 2 weeks after leaving, I rented an apartment and started living alone. I haven't heard from Mark since then. He probably thinks I'll come back eventually. The thought of Mark taking the current situation lightly infuriates me. However, today is the day after his restaurant's day off. I expect a call from Mark when he visits the restaurant for a lunch prep. Hey, what's going on here? The restaurant is completely empty, Mark exclaimed over the phone. Just as I thought, I chuckled. Mark, I could explain over the phone, but it would be more efficient if your mom was there too. I'm heading to the house now. Can you come back? You could open the restaurant anyway, right? I couldn't help but laugh before hanging up, amused by Mark's reaction. What on earth is this? The restaurant's fridge, cooking equipment, tables, all the important stuff is gone. Did you do this? Do you think you can get away with this for free? As soon as I arrived at the house, my mother-in-law started yelling at me. It seems Mark had explained half of the situation. There was an unfamiliar couple in the living room, apparently Daniel and his wife. They looked confused and anxious, not fully grasping the situation and my mother-in-law's extreme anger. It's my restaurant, so there shouldn't be a problem with me starting the closing process or having the items I bought disposed of by a junk removal service, right? I countered, huh? Your restaurant? What are you talking about? Why didn't you explain, Mark? You haven't told your mom, have you? You remember that I still have the main restaurant and the second branch, and the second one was in a financial crisis, right? Mark began, yes, of course. You worked hard to turn it around, changing the tables, chairs, signboard, the restaurant's atmosphere, bringing in new cooking equipment, expanding the menu, and replacing the fridge and freezer to accommodate the new menu, right? My mother-in-law nodded. Well, about that. Linda actually paid for those expenses, Mark confessed. Hearing Mark's words, my mother-in-law looked perplexed. She seemed to be trying hard to understand but probably lacked the full information to grasp everything. Mark continued, looking uncomfortable, as if he was holding back a bathroom break. Seeing that this was going nowhere, I decided to explain. Before turning 40, I was single and working in night consulting. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, nor did we buy a new house after getting married, so I had saved up quite a bit of money. I lent Mark $200,000 to help turn around his struggling second restaurant branch. $200,000? But you can't just hand over such a large amount of money to your spouse, right? My mother-in-law exclaimed. That's why I decided to buy the rights to the second branch and become its owner, I explained. I left most of the management to Mark, so there wasn't much for me to do as the owner. The only change was that Mark shifted his focus from the main branch to the second one for its recovery. When Mark's restaurant was in crisis, I had to show my concern alongside him. It was when my mother-in-law yelled at me for not showing enough trust in my husband that I decided to support Mark to the fullest. My form of support was giving him the money I had saved during my single years. Mark, is this true? My mother-in-law asked. Yeah, it's true. She said it was okay if I failed and wasted the $200,000. She gave me the money, but since it was such a large amount, it was going to fail anyway. She suggested becoming the owner. The plan was to pay back the borrowed $200,000 from the restaurant's earnings. But it was simpler for Linda to become the owner and have the restaurant's income go directly to her. It also meant that she could decide whether to close the restaurant or not. It's a lie. Can something like that really happen? My mother-in-law exclaimed. I understand it's hard to believe hearing this all of a sudden. That's why I brought some evidence, I said, spreading documents like the business license transfer of rights agreement and lease agreement on the table, proving that I was the owner of the restaurant. My mother-in-law's face turned red as she confirmed my name on those documents. Why didn't you say anything about this? You always talked about how you believed in Mark and how the restaurant was recovering, right? She demanded. Even before we got married, you always encouraged Mark like that. He felt pressured by your words but tried to live up to your expectations. Not wanting to disappoint you as the head of the household, you're pretty cold to people like me and Daniel who don't fulfill their roles, right? That's why Mark couldn't tell you he borrowed a large sum of money from me. He could have just told me. That's why Mark couldn't speak his mind because you get upset easily. People like my mother-in-law often don't realize they're putting pressure on others. They might think it's just a small thing to say, but for the one under pressure, it's a huge burden. Not something they can easily talk about. And even if they did speak up, you would likely be disappointed and start complaining. It was essential not to let Mark's spirit break under her constant jabs, especially when the restaurant was finally turning around. That's why I kept quiet too. But I really wish she had refused when Daniel and his family were coming back. Probably Mark thought it was work-related and agreed without thinking much, I admitted. Mom, Linda, I'm sorry. This situation is my fault for not being decisive enough. If I had managed the restaurant well from the start, Linda wouldn't have had to lend her money. And if I wasn't such a weakling, I could have told you the truth. If Linda decides to close the restaurant, then that's it. But what about the part-time workers? Mark said. Don't worry. In the past 2 weeks, I've already informed everyone about closing the restaurant, and they've all understood. For those interested, I've arranged part-time work at other restaurants through my IT consulting contacts, I assured. That's a relief. So everyone was in on this, Linda showing me an empty restaurant as a surprise, and everyone keeping the closure for me. My mother-in-law asked. Mark, I'm sorry too. I've been pressuring you and Linda. I'm sorry for everything up to now. I won't tell you to leave again. My mother-in-law apologized, and it seemed as if everything was resolving nicely. But that's a misunderstanding. I'm far from being satisfied, and the discussion is far from over. Let's settle this matter next, I said, pulling out divorce papers. What's this? A divorce paper? Mark picked up the papers in shock. Why a divorce? This is supposed to be a reconciliation, right? Don't just assume we've reconciled. You might think it's a secret, but I know about your affair with the part-timer. All the part-time workers knew about it too. I said, displaying an image on my smartphone sent by a part-time worker showing Mark entering a hotel. Anyone can take such evidence, not just the police or detectives. Getting the second branch back on track gave you too much confidence. You really got carried away, I concluded. I remarked that as the owner of the restaurant, I couldn't just stand aside from the day-to-day operations. Even though I couldn't do much in terms of daily management, I made it a point to visit from time to time. During these visits, the part-time workers complained to me about Mark's affair and asked for my help. When I promised to handle it, they provided incredible support. They leaked information about Mark's affair, sent me proof, and even kept silent about the restaurant's closure from him. Wait a minute, closing the second branch and a divorce? What's going to happen to the rent for this place? My mother-in-law's voice shook. I haven't mentioned that yet. I've been paying the entire rent of $10,000 a month for this house. Is that also true? Mark's shoulders slumped. It's true. When the restaurant's revenue started falling, Linda started paying half of it. But as revenue continued to drop, the amount she had to cover increased. Eventually, I ended up paying it all, $10,000 a month. It's the same as my salary, so I paid all the rent. And Mark covered other living expenses like food and utilities. So if Mark gets divorced and only has the main restaurant left, obviously living here won't be an option anymore, I stated matter-of-factly. Mark and my mother-in-law seemed deflated after hearing my words. They slumped as if they had exhausted themselves in a boxing match. Daniel and his wife, now somewhat understanding the situation, hesitantly joined the conversation. What does that mean? We came back here, can't live here? Sorry, Daniel. Right now, I don't have the means to help you with a restaurant or a house, Mark explained. Come on, do something. We're having a baby, at least give me a job. We have enough part-time, Daniel protested. The argument escalated, and it became clear that the future was uncertain for everyone involved. Witnessing the brothers dispute over their mother, the mother-child relationship also deteriorated. Now Mark and his mother are living together reluctantly in a smaller apartment, hardly talking and creating an awkward atmosphere. After the divorce, I first dealt with closing down the restaurant. It was a bit of a hassle, but as the owner, it was my responsibility. However, the fridge, cooking equipment, tables, and chairs I had removed were fairly new, so I managed to sell them at a good price. Adding just a little more money allowed me to finish the restaurant's closure, I recounted. Though it was a brief period, being a restaurant owner and handling its closure was an experience. I believe these experiences will be useful in my IT consulting work someday. I guess work suits me better than marriage. Convinced of this, I continue to work hard today. After the tumultuous events that unfolded, the conclusion of this saga brought a mix of resolution and uncertainty. I continued. The revelation of the true ownership of the restaurant, coupled with the exposure of Mark's affair, exposed the fractures in the family. The decision to close the second branch of the restaurant added a layer of financial stress and uncertainty about the future. Despite the apologies, it became clear that reconciling the strained relationships would be a complex and ongoing process, I added. The introduction of divorce papers, a decisive move by Linda, added another layer of complexity to this situation. The betrayal of trust both in the marriage and the business became a pivotal point that left the characters grappling with the aftermath. Linda's firm stance indicated that she was unwilling to overlook the breach of fidelity and was determined to take control of her life, even if it meant ending the marriage, I noted. As the fallout extended to Daniel and his family, the once close ties between the brothers strained, revealing the fragility of familial bonds under pressure. The uncertainty about living arrangements and financial stability left everyone involved facing an uncertain future. The emotional toll of the conflicts was palpable, as seen in the strained relationships and the awkward atmosphere that settled over the characters, I explained. In the end, the story leaves us with a sense of closure regarding the restaurant's closure and Linda's decision to end her marriage. However, it also leaves many questions unanswered about the characters' futures and whether they can rebuild their lives and relationships after the storm that shook the foundations of their family. The resolution, while bringing some clarity, marks the beginning of a new chapter for each character as they navigate the aftermath of the choices made and the consequences faced, I concluded.
Yesterday you overheard our conversation, didn't you? My eldest son and his wife are returning home for the birth of their child. Consequently, I need you to clear your belongings out to the yard. Excuse me, but you can't have kids anyway, and you don't contribute to my son's work. The least you could do is make some room, especially since I'm paying $10,000 in rent. This situation is becoming too tiresome to deal with. I'm currently living with my mother-in-law, but she now wants me out of the house because my brother-in-law and his wife are returning. With my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, his wife, and my husband, this house is full of problems. I've been trying to maintain a smooth household, but it's becoming a hassle to think about it all. I'm done thinking. Okay, I'll leave, but I can't just put my belongings in the yard, so I'll come back later to pick them up. You're leaving? Thank you. That's a big help. Ignoring my pleas, my mother-in-law, I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called a junk removal service. Once I stopped thinking, no one could stop my actions. I'm Linda, a 40-year-old egg consultant. My husband, Mark, also 40, runs 3 restaurants as a sole proprietor. Although people often assume we've been married for a long time with kids, we're actually newlyweds. We both lived as workaholics and only married at this age. I had given up on marriage just before turning 40, but a random visit to a bar after work changed my mind. Is this your first time here? Mark asked with a smile as I sat at the end of the bar. I had been curious about the place for a while, and this time I decided to go in as a reward to myself for working hard. Mark assured me that many women come alone, and I felt comfortable as a loner at the counter. I became a regular, always sitting at the end of the bar, and it became normal for Mark to chat with me while I ate. I'm always busy with work, and I can't talk much. How about we go out for dinner sometime? Excited about the chance to dine with a restaurateur, I eagerly agreed. Our conversation slowly drew me to Mark's dedication to his work, and he grew fond of me, seeing that I was a hardworking person. We started dating, and 2 years later, as we both turned 40, we decided to get married. Feeling shy about being a bride at 40, I asked my husband to skip the wedding ceremony, and we just took some photos of us dressed up. After getting married, I moved from my apartment to my husband's 3-story house with a garden and parking in a high-end area where the rent is around $1,000. Living with my 70-year-old mother-in-law seemed necessary, given the circumstances. I immediately agreed, but after moving in with my mother-in-law, I regretted accepting so quickly. When I settled into my husband's house, I realized it was too big for just the 2 of us. In addition to our bedroom, I had a lavish office room for myself, and there were many spare rooms. Curious, I asked my husband a simple question: why do we need such a big house just for you and your mother? My husband explained that he has a brother 3 years older than him who left home after college, and they've lost touch. He hasn't been home for a few years, and my husband anticipates that one day he might return, which prompted them to rent a bigger house. I expressed my opinion that it might be a little too big. Well, I got married and you came, so I guess it all worked out, my husband said with a smile as he unpacked my books and arranged them on the shelf. He shared stories about his brother Daniel, who seemed to be hopping from job to job. Despite his brother's situation, my husband didn't harbor negative feelings towards him. Don't talk about that kid. What if he really comes back? My mother-in-law appeared at the doorway of what would be my office, seemingly checking on us. It was clear she didn't have a good opinion of him, unlike my husband. I worried that conflicts might arise between my husband and mother-in-law regarding his brother someday. "I'm not too fond of you either, Mom. Come on, we're going to live together now, so stop saying things like that," I said. My mother-in-law walked away, and my husband apologized, assuring me he would talk to her. I told him it's okay. I had a similar talk when we met for the wedding. "I'll build a relationship with your mother as we live together," I assured him, taking a book from his paused hands and placing it on the shelf. It seemed she didn't like my age. Being 40 makes it challenging to have children, and my mother-in-law probably wished Mark had married someone younger. Once the move was complete and our married life officially began, my mother-in-law's coldness towards me became evident. While there was no harassment or physical violence, she ignored or avoided me as much as possible. It felt a bit lonely, but I decided to consider it okay for now and hope to build a relationship with her over time. More pressing was my concern for Mark. "Are you okay with your work?" I asked him. "No, it's pretty bad. I need to take action soon, but it's tough to arrange the finances," Mark replied, sitting at the dining table with his head in his hands. I abandoned the dishes and settled in front of him, eager to listen. "These are tough times," Mark began, his voice heavy with concern. "Prices are soaring, expenses climbing, and customers are tightening their wallets. There's no end in sight. If this keeps up, I might have to close another one of our stores." About a year into our marriage, the situation at Mark's restaurants worsened. One of the 3 stores had already closed, and it seemed another might follow suit. Seeing Mark's troubled face weighed heavily on me, but my mother-in-law appeared unfazed by these challenges. "You're Mark's wife, but you don't help out at the store. You just do your own job. Can you really say you're fulfilling your role as a wife?" My mother-in-law's voice cut through the air from the living room, having overheard our conversation. I wondered what she was thinking, but she had her own perspective. "Mark has been running his own restaurant for nearly 10 years, overcoming various challenges. I believe he'll pull through this time too. You, his wife, shouldn't be making that face. Are you trying to feed into his anxiety and make him fail?" "What a terrible wife," she shouted again, her words dripping with spite and venom. I knew she wasn't simply trying to provoke me, but there was some truth in her words. Taking her words positively, I resolved to support Mark to the fullest, smiling reassuringly at my anxious husband. A year later, just as she said, Mark managed to turn the situation around and avoided closing a second store. "See, I told you," I said to my mother-in-law. "A stupid wife who can't even trust her husband." "Don't drag Mark down," she replied, lashing out at me without reservation. Though our relationship seemed strained, since Mark's business was doing well, I considered it a break-even situation. However, things took a turn for the worse. Mark, having stabilized the business and with some extra money, seemed to get carried away, and rumors of his affairs surfaced. I couldn't fathom what he was thinking. Surely there were better ways to spend the money. It's peculiar how bad situations tend to pile up. Having witnessed Mark's business revenue drop, I understood this all too well, but I never imagined it would happen to me. Then Daniel called, my brother. Yes, Daniel, a freelancer, and his pregnant girlfriend, who worked at the same bar as Mark. They asked if they could move into our house and if they could work at Mark's restaurant. As I pondered how to address Mark about the affair from the dining room, my mother-in-law entered the living room and engaged him in conversation. They discussed Daniel, whom I had never met, and I felt completely sidelined as they continued their discussion. It was a peculiar scene. My mother-in-law, who used to resent Daniel for not fulfilling his role as the eldest son, was now urging Mark to welcome him. The reason was straightforward: the prospect of a grandchild. She had previously given up hope of seeing one but now perceived an opportunity and had a change of heart. She even planned to offer them a home and jobs. Mark, who had always been supportive of Daniel, had rented this large house for such an occasion. However, circumstances had shifted, and I found myself caught in the middle. It struck me as odd to have Daniel and his family move in. I glanced at Mark from the dining area, and he returned my gaze with a troubled expression. Come on, it's a good thing. Daniel is in trouble, and you, Mark, have the means to help him, my mother-in-law said, pressing him. Mark seemed unable to refuse his mother's request, and I couldn't help but feel disappointed. I had hoped he would stand up to her, but it seemed like wishful thinking. He kept glancing at me, likely concerned about my reaction. With the deteriorating relationship with my mother-in-law, Mark's affair, and now the prospect of living with Daniel and his family, the problems were mounting. Overwhelmed and unsure where to begin, I decided to abandon my thoughts for the day and simply go to sleep. The next day, a holiday and likely due to extreme mental fatigue, I slept in until late morning. Mark was at work, leaving just my mother-in-law and me at home. As I reluctantly made my way to the living room, I dreaded what she might say about my late awakening. You sure slept in. Must be nice to have such leisure, she remarked, surpassing my expectations. She then informed me about Daniel and his wife's impending visit for maternity leave. So move your stuff out to the yard. Excuse me? I questioned, still groggy from sleep. She clarified that I should vacate to make room for Daniel and his family, citing my inability to have children and lack of contribution to Mark's work. I was taken aback. It seems she was indeed asking me to leave the house. Realizing that my presence was now deemed unnecessary, I decided it was too much trouble to fret over Mark, my mother-in-law, Daniel's family, and our future. Understood, I'll leave, I declared. I can't put all my belongings in the yard, so I'll come back later to pick them up. Ignoring my words, my mother-in-law expressed gratitude, and I began packing my things, leaving the house 7 seconds after stepping out the door. I grabbed my phone and dialed a junk removal service, my decision firm and resolute after putting an end to my overthinking. No one could sway me now. Let them all come to regret this choice later. Departing from the house, I opted to stay at a hotel temporarily. Although I had arranged for the removal service, they required some time to prepare. This aligned perfectly with my desire for some time alone. 2 weeks after leaving, I secured an apartment and began living independently. Since then, I hadn't heard from Mark, who probably believed I'd eventually return. The idea of Mark taking the current situation lightly infuriated me. However, today marked the day after his restaurant's day off, and I anticipated a call from Mark when he visited the restaurant for lunch prep. What's going on here? The restaurant is completely empty, Mark exclaimed over the phone, confirming my expectations. Just as I thought, I chuckled and replied, Mark, I could explain over the phone, but it would be more efficient if your mom was there too. I'm heading to the house now. Can you come back? You could open the restaurant anyway, right? Unable to contain my laughter, I hung up, amused by Mark's reaction. He must be quite shocked. Still chuckling, I began preparing to leave. Upon arriving at the house, my mother-in-law immediately started yelling at me. Mark had apparently explained part of the situation. An unfamiliar couple, Daniel and his wife, were in the living room, looking confused and anxious, not fully grasping the situation amid my mother-in-law's extreme anger. Why would you do such a thing? The restaurant can't operate now, she continued to scold. I countered, stating that it was my restaurant, and there shouldn't be a problem with me starting the closing process or having the items I bought disposed of by a junk removal service. Huh, your restaurant? What are you talking about? Why don't you explain, Mark? You haven't told your mom, have you? I challenged. Mark hesitated but confessed, admitting that I had paid for the expenses to turn around his struggling second restaurant branch. Hearing this, my mother-in-law looked perplexed, trying hard to understand but lacking the full information. Mark continued, uncomfortable and holding back, so I decided to step in and clarify. Before turning 40, I was single and working in ad consulting, with no wedding ceremony or new house purchase after marriage. I had saved up a significant amount of money. I lent Mark $200,000 to help revitalize his second restaurant branch, subsequently buying the rights to become its owner. I explained that I left most of the management to Mark, shifting his focus from the main branch to the second for its recovery. When Mark's restaurant was in crisis, I showed my concern alongside him. It was during a moment when my mother-in-law criticized me for not showing enough trust in my husband that I decided to support Mark to the fullest. My form of support was providing him with the necessary funds. During my single years, I had diligently saved money. Mark, is this true? My mother-in-law asked incredulously. Yes, it's true, Mark admitted. She seemed surprisingly okay with it, even if I failed and squandered the $200,000 she had given me. Given the sizable amount, she suggested that if it was destined to fail anyway, it might be simpler for me to become the owner. The plan was to repay the borrowed $200,000 from the restaurant's earnings, but it was more straightforward for me to become the owner, with the restaurant's income going directly to me. Additionally, it afforded me the authority to decide whether to keep the restaurant open or not. It's a lie. Can something like that really happen? My mother-in-law exclaimed. To provide evidence, I spread documents like the business license transfer, rights agreement, and lease agreement on the table, proving my ownership of the restaurant. As she confirmed my name on those documents, her face turned red with shock. Why didn't you say anything about this? You always talked about how you believed in Mark and how the restaurant was recovering, right? She demanded. Mark explained that he felt pressured by her words, always striving to live up to her expectations. He didn't want to disappoint her, so he couldn't bring himself to reveal that he had borrowed a large sum of money from me. He feared her reaction, knowing how easily upset she could be. People like my mother-in-law often don't realize the pressure they put on others, and Mark found it challenging to express himself under her constant scrutiny. It was crucial not to let Mark's spirit break under her constant jabs, especially when the restaurant was finally turning around. That's why I kept quiet too. Mark and my mother-in-law apologized, and it seemed like everything was being resolved amicably. However, it was far from satisfactory for me, and the discussion was far from over. I handed Mark a divorce paper, shocking him. He assumed it was a reconciliation, but I knew about his affair with a part-timer, and the other part-time workers were aware of it too. Mark was taken aback, claiming it was just a rumor, but I presented evidence, a photo sent by a part-time worker showing Mark entering a hotel. While anyone could fabricate such evidence, it was undeniable. The success of the second branch had given him too much confidence, and he had gotten carried away. The resolution wasn't as simple as reconciliation. It required deeper discussions and decisions to be made. I reflected on my role as the restaurant owner, acknowledging that while I couldn't handle day-to-day operations, I made occasional visits to stay connected. The part-time workers, having learned about Mark's affair, sought my assistance. With their unwavering support, they provided evidence and kept the impending closure of the restaurant from Mark. My mother-in-law's voice quivered as she confronted the reality of closing the second branch and the impending divorce. The revelation that I had been paying the entire $10,000 monthly rent added another layer of shock. Mark, now burdened with the weight of financial difficulties, faced an uncertain future. As the discussion progressed, Daniel and his wife realized the challenges they would encounter in continuing to live in the house. Daniel pleaded for help, citing their impending parenthood, but the escalating argument underscored the uncertainty surrounding everyone's future. After the divorce, I focused on closing the restaurant, selling equipment to offset expenses. The experience as a restaurant owner proved insightful, reinforcing my commitment to my aita consulting career. With the family dynamics strained, the fallout extended to Mark and his mother, now sharing a small apartment with strained communication. The resolution brought both closure and uncertainty. The exposure of Mark's affair and the revelation of true ownership exposed familial fractures. The decision to close the restaurant added financial stress, and the introduction of divorce papers signaled a decisive move by me to take control of my life. The aftermath left strained relationships, financial uncertainty, and an uncertain future for everyone involved. The emotional toll of the conflicts was palpable, and the story closes with a sense of closure for some aspects but leaves lingering questions about the characters' futures and their ability to rebuild after the storm. The resolution, while providing clarity, marks the beginning of a new chapter as each character navigates the consequences of their choices.
When I ventured into a town I seldom visited for shopping,
I stumbled upon a disconcerting sight. My husband and mother walking arm in arm, sharing intimate kisses without a hint of concern for onlookers. Overwhelmed with shock, I confronted them, only to find them unapologetic, even justifying their actions. Swiftly, I divulged the shocking revelation to my father and opted for a divorce. However, life took an unexpected turn after my father's demise, leading me to cross paths with my mother and ex-husband once again. Years had passed, and as I laid eyes on my mother, her visibly pregnant belly spoke volumes. Catching my gaze, she smirked in triumph. "Ah, you've noticed. There's a little one growing in here. It seems like you've been yearning for this for quite a while, struggling with infertility. Well, we managed to achieve it effortlessly. Now I can finally embrace fatherhood." The decision to part ways had been a wise one. They aimed to hurt me with insults, but to their dismay, I remained impervious to their attempts. "That's quite amusing. The two of you look utterly foolish together," I remarked, laughter bubbling within me. My name is Emily, a 24-year-old office worker, born to young parents entangled in a whirlwind romance. My parents, Linda and Ken, married hastily due to my arrival during their high school years. Initially, their union appeared promising, with my father actively involved in my early years. However, a workplace accident left him physically impaired, triggering a drastic change in my mother's demeanor. As my father struggled with rehabilitation, my mother's indifference and disdain for him became evident. She spewed insults and mockery, creating a strained environment. Despite financial challenges, my father's perseverance allowed him to walk again, but my mother's coldness persisted. Growing up, my mother vented her discontent about my father, creating a rift between them. Our family struggled financially, and my mother's night shifts left me primarily under my father's care. Graduating from high school, my dreams of college were dashed by my mother's insistence that I work to support the family. "I'm sorry, Emily. My condition has forced this life upon you. Don't apologize, Dad. I'm content if it eases your burden." After years of hard work, I married Michael, hoping to create a warm family unlike my parents' strained relationship. However, the joy turned to frustration when conceiving proved elusive, and Michael shifted the blame entirely onto me. "I wanted kids too, but it seems you're the issue. Why can't we have children?" Desperate, I suggested seeking medical advice, but Michael stubbornly blamed me and refused infertility treatments. As my efforts to conceive faltered, suspicions arose about his fidelity, fueled by late-night returns with the scent of perfume lingering on his clothes. The journey that began with familial betrayal had woven into a tale of personal resilience and strength. Further scrutiny of the credit card statements unveiled unexplained expenditures, deepening my suspicions. Direct confrontation with my husband seemed fruitless, anticipating his evasion of the inquiry. The opportune moment to address my concerns emerged during an unexpected visit to a town I rarely frequented for shopping. Spotting my husband, who claimed to be working that day, walking with a woman by his side stirred curiosity. "Is that Michael? He was supposed to be working today," I mused, ready to call out to him. My surprise intensified when I identified the woman accompanying him. It was my mother. Since marrying, I had maintained distance from her, seldom bringing my husband to my parents' house. Observing them discreetly, my astonishment peaked as they held hands and kissed. Unable to contain my shock, I confronted them, chasing after the unexpected duo. "Hey, Michael." "Mom." Caught off guard, they halted, feigning surprise. My mother attempted to downplay the situation, claiming they merely ran into each other and exchanged pleasantries. Approaching my mother, I discerned a familiar scent, one I had encountered on my husband's clothes after his late-night returns. Reluctantly, I concluded that my mother was his clandestine partner. "Don't lie, I saw it. You and Michael kissing." Their denials crumbled under the weight of my revelation. Admitting their deceit, my mother revealed her involvement with Michael. "Huh, you must be mistaken. We just happened to bump into each other, that's all." "I didn't think we'd be found out so soon," she protested. Their web of deception unraveled further as my husband confessed his preference for older women, specifically naming my mother Linda. Sorry, Emily. I did feel bad for you. But I've liked Michael since we first met, my mother confessed, laying bare the painful betrayal. My mother and husband shamelessly confessed to shocking revelations. It was just a chance encounter, and things unfolded while having tea. I'm young and crave love experiences, my husband admitted unabashedly. With our marriage already strained, talking to Linda intensified my attraction towards her, he confessed. Acknowledging the information, my mother addressed our fertility struggles, adding, Michael desired a boy, and unfortunately, because of you. Unable to comprehend the depths of their betrayal, I confronted them about divulging our private matters to my mother. You talked about our issues with my mom? It's true, isn't it? You blame me for not having kids. Incredibly, my husband had aired our intimate struggles to my mother, portraying himself as the victim. Anger surged within me, realizing the impossibility of sustaining this marriage. You're the worst. Do you even realize what you've done? I yelled at the pair, exhausted by their feeble justifications. I can't help it. Your failure as a wife and a woman led to this, he retorted callously. Well, I don't mean a husband like you. Seeking liberation, I declared, I want a divorce. I've grown tired of your constant excuses and inability to have kids. It'll be a relief to be free of a useless wife like you. Apologizing insincerely, my mother remarked, I didn't mean to, but it seems like taking your precious husband away. My bad. Unmoved by her false remorse, I issued a warning. If I disclose this affair to Dad, your divorce is imminent. Brace yourself. My mother's demeanor shifted at the revelation, but she swiftly regained her composure. Well, there's no concrete evidence of our affair. Your divorce with Michael is your business. I'll divorce when I feel like it. Let's go, she declared, prompting Michael to hastily abandon me. Despite their evident infidelity, my mother displayed no urgency in divorcing my father. In stark contrast, I promptly headed to my parents' house and disclosed everything to my father. So that's what's been happening, huh? I endured that woman for years, thinking it would be better for you to have a mother. I never expected her to be this terrible to her own daughter. My father expressed his disappointment with a bitter glance. I've decided to divorce Michael. I can't stay married after what happened. What about Mom? I inquired. Don't worry. I have a plan. I won't let them have their way, my father assured. Later, Michael sent the completed divorce forms, which I signed, formalizing our separation. My mother, however, never returned home, apparently eloping with Michael. Despite the frustration, my father advised me to let go of them both, and I chose to move on from my ex-husband and my mother. Leaving the apartment I shared with Michael, I returned to my parents' house. Ironically, my father had become adept at taking care of himself, thanks to my mother's lack of assistance. Though the outcome was unfortunate, I found solace in returning to my roots. It's good to be living with you again, Emily. Thank you for coming back, my father expressed his gratitude. A fleeting period of tranquility with my father was abruptly disrupted by his contraction of the prevalent pneumonia, thrusting him into a perilous struggle between life and death. Emily, I've burdened you greatly, and I'm sincerely sorry. Live your life as you see fit. My father, teetering on the edge of consciousness, tightly held my hand and imparted those parting words. I tearfully nodded in response. Despite concerted efforts to combat the illness, his health deteriorated rapidly, leading to his eventual demise. Dad, I can't fathom your sudden departure. I wish I had been there more for you. I lamented while grappling with the preparations for his funeral. In the midst of my grief, an unwelcome pair arrived unannounced at our doorstep. A long time no see. Heard he died. My mother, and to my dismay, my ex-husband Michael stood there, their faces adorned with disagreeable smiles. They intruded with a brazen sense of entitlement. Why are you here? Leave. Who do you think you are? I am his wife. It's only natural for a wife to be present when her husband passes, my mother asserted. How dare you say that after abandoning us for years? Ah, yes, yes, say what you want. Regardless of your objections, I am his wife. That entitles me to the inheritance. Wasn't there insurance? Disgusting. So, you never divorced Dad for this reason. Reflecting on my father's journey, despite lacking formal education and retiring from construction work due to injuries, he ascended to a respected position in a later joined company. His perseverance, honed during his time as a craftsman, endeared him to colleagues. My mother's decision to abstain from divorce now seemed strategic, securing a share of his hard-earned legacy. Now let's discuss the division of property. Knowing him, he wasn't driven by material desires, so I'm aware he saved up quite a sum, my mother suggested, pushing the conversation forward. It was then that I noticed something peculiar about her. She was dressed in maternity clothes, and her belly was notably large. Catching my gaze, she chuckled triumphantly. Oh, you've noticed. Yes, I'm carrying Michael's child. Unlike you, Emily, who couldn't conceive. We succeeded right away. Breaking up with you was truly the best decision. Now I can finally become a father. They proceeded to hurl hurtful insults, attempting to inflict maximum pain. Yet their efforts proved futile. I remained unaffected. That's amusing. Both of you look so foolish together, I laughed, holding my stomach, as they stared dumbfounded. What's so funny? This is just ridiculous. But are you certain that child is truly Michael's? My question irritated Michael, but my mother's composure wavered. Her eyes darted around, revealing a visible unease, though Michael remained oblivious. It's undoubtedly my child. Don't make baseless accusations out of bitterness. Yes, exactly. No need to be bitter. We'll see if it's baseless once you see this. Stepping away, I returned with the document in hand, presenting it to them. What's this all about? What? Why are you so surprised? It can't be that significant. What's the meaning of this? Both were taken aback by the document. A detective agency's investigation report summarizing my mother's social interactions. After my mother eloped with Michael, I coincidentally spotted her in the city. However, she wasn't with Michael, but with a young man I didn't recognize. Following them discreetly, they entered a hotel together. What does this mean? Could it be that Mom is? Having consulted with my father during his lifetime, I opted to investigate my mother's behavior, sensing its potential usefulness. The detective agency's findings confirmed my suspicions. My mother was deeply entangled with a man other than Michael. As Michael read the document with disbelief, he cast accusing glares at my mother standing beside him. What on earth? Were you deceiving me? This is absurd. Emily is lying. The child in my belly is undoubtedly yours. Despite her flustered state, my mother vehemently insisted that the baby was Michael's. Whom do you believe, Emily or me? Oh, that's convenient. Accusing your own mother just because you couldn't have children. What a terrible woman. Michael, swayed by my mother, regained his composure. They dismissed the report as false and resumed blaming me. Believe what you want, but unfortunately, there's concrete evidence. You can come out now. Summoning someone from the next room, a man entered. Who's that? I don't know him. Both were puzzled by the appearance of the unfamiliar man. This is my husband. You wouldn't know him, of course, because after you, I remarried him. His name is Tham. I met him through a friend a year after divorcing Michael and remarried him. How does this man prove anything? Unlike with you, I am genuinely pregnant with this child. So what? Speak plainly. Don't you get it? I couldn't conceive with you, no matter how hard we tried, but with Tham, I got pregnant right away. The implication of my words dawned on Michael, and his eyes widened. You avoided going to the clinic because it was a hassle. But I had tests done, and there were no issues with my fertility, so the problem was with you. That's a lie. But it's strange, isn't it? Supposedly, you have infertility issues, yet my mother is pregnant. Are you sure that baby is yours? Confronted with my question, Michael couldn't argue back and turned his glare towards Linda beside him. Hey, tell me the truth. Ah, fine, you win. You admitted it rather quickly. I thought you'd deny it more. Being with you, Michael, was just a game for me. What do you mean? I was with you because you were Emily's husband, you know, coveting what someone else had. But my true love was another man. I was planning to leave you soon anyway. Stunned by her words, Michael was left without a response. I intended to enjoy this game until I got caught. Well, it doesn't matter whether or not I'm carrying his child. My right to the inheritance remains unchanged. You're still fixated on the inheritance? Unfortunately, you'll have to abandon that notion. What? How many times do I have to say it? I never divorced your father, so I have a right to the inheritance. That's what I've been trying to tell you. There's no such right because you and Dad were divorced long ago. That can't be. Maybe you've forgotten because of your age, but Dad had the divorce papers you already filled out. When I reported my mother's affair to my father, he revealed a completed divorce form. Apparently, he had kept it without filing it because of me. But before he passed away, he used that form to divorce my mother. So, Linda, you won't get a single penny of Dad's estate. Do you understand now? That can't be. At my words, my mother, who had been smug until then, turned pale. Michael continued glaring at her. I'm going home. Realizing her affair was exposed and that she would not receive any inheritance, my mother fled as if running away. Later, my mother did give birth to a boy, but it was clear without even needing a DNA test that he was not Michael's child. I never thought you'd be such a jerk. He abandoned my mother, who failed to secure any inheritance, and disappeared. The man who was my mother's main affair partner also ran away upon learning of her pregnancy, as their relationship was apparently just a casual fling for him. In the end, my mother became a single mother at 40, left to raise a young child on her own without anyone to rely on. She is raising her son on welfare. The care of a small boy at her old age is physically demanding, and she has aged significantly. I once saw my mother with her son from a distance. With increased gray hair, she looked more like a grandmother than a mother. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a healthy girl, and now our family of 3 lives happily. Ironically, the child my mother gave birth to is my half-brother, and he will be in the same grade as my daughter, making our family situation quite complicated. On the anniversary of my father's death, we planned to visit his grave as a family of 3. The betrayal by my ex-husband and mother was painful, but it led me to gain an irreplaceable family. Surely he's watching over us from heaven, right? My father in heaven. He must also be delighted with the birth of his granddaughter. With the love he gave us in our hearts, we vowed to continue walking closely as a family. Mel got really upset at my baby shower. She insulted me and tried to name my baby, but things got out of control, and she ended up getting arrested. I'm 29, married to my amazing husband, Gary, and we're expecting our first child. Gary and I have been together for a long time, got married 4 years ago, and we've been trying to have a baby since last year. We were overjoyed when we found out about my pregnancy 6 months ago. We faced life's ups and downs together, and the news of our little one has brought so much happiness to our relationship. Every day brings us closer to meeting our baby, and we can't wait. Pregnancy has been a mix of emotions, from the excitement of finding out to feeling the baby kick. Gary has been my support through it all, attending every doctor's appointment, reading parenting books with me, and helping set up the nursery. We're fully in baby mode now, discussing names, decorating the nursery, and making plans for the future. Gary is thrilled to be a dad, and his enthusiasm warms my heart. We're sharing the preparations for the baby and facing the challenges and fun parts of pregnancy together, enjoying every moment. 2 months ago, we decided it was time to share the exciting news with our family. After making sure we passed the crucial first trimester, we invited our parents, close family, and friends for lunch. They were expecting a regular lunch, but when they noticed my growing stomach, their expressions changed to joy and amazement. My mother even started crying when she saw me and confirmed the pregnancy. My mom understood why we kept the pregnancy a secret and was happy to be a grandmother soon. However, Gary's mom, Barbara, had a different reaction. Instead of sharing our joy, She got angry when she found out we kept the pregnancy hidden. She felt left out and accused me of excluding her on purpose. Even though I tried to explain, she stayed mad and wouldn't talk to me. This put a damper on what should have been a joyful family occasion. Throughout the night, Barbara ignored me and even disrespected my mom, who had always been kind to her before. Barbara seemed upset, buried in her phone while everyone else talked. She openly told everyone how she had no idea about my pregnancy, making her feel like she missed out on time with a grandchild who wasn't even born yet. My husband and his brother noticed Barbara's frustration, and as tension grew, I reached a breaking point. I stepped out to gather myself, and my mom comforted me until I could return. At the end of the night, Barbara made a point of saying goodbye to me last, barely exchanging more than a quick greeting. Later, my husband walked them to the car, where they had a loud argument that I could hear from the foyer. Barbara used the opportunity to complain about me, making the situation even stranger. Luckily, all our guests had left by then. It was just my parents, Gary, and his parents left. Barbara angrily confronted Gary, expressing disbelief that I had the audacity to keep the pregnancy a secret from her, claiming I didn't consider her family. My husband calmly explained that we waited until it was safe to share the news, but Barbara started yelling. Their conversation went like this. Barbara, this is our grandchild. I deserve to know from the beginning. Gary, Mom, it's not about deserving. It was a decision we made together. We wanted to be cautious. Barbara, cautious? I am her mother-in-law. She should have trusted me. This is all her fault. My husband lost his temper, telling his mother it was their decision, and if she blamed me, she should blame him too. He asked her to stop attacking me and leave to cool off. Barbara stormed away, leaving my husband visibly frustrated and disappointed. I didn't realize tears were streaming down my face. Gary comforted me and guided me back inside. My parents stayed back, sensing the tension until I felt composed. Barbara didn't stop there. Later that night, I got a message from her. Anxiously, I read it, and it said, I must say I am deeply disappointed in you. You knowingly kept a significant piece of information from me, and I find it absolutely unforgivable. I can't believe you would rob me of the joy of knowing about my grandchild from the very beginning. This is not how a family should operate, and I find it disrespectful and hurtful. Instead of apologizing for your immature action, you are causing a divide between me and my son. Shame on you. Her words cut through me, and I felt a mix of anger and hurt. I showed the message to Gary, and he was furious. He couldn't understand why his mother would react so negatively and blame me. Gary decided to call her, warning her not to send such negative messages, as it might distress me further. He even threatened to cut her off if this behavior continued. Gary's words and angry tones seemed to have an impact on Barbara. Faced with the possibility of being cut off, she changed her tune. Instead of acknowledging her own role in the conflict, she proposed a solution. She claimed the only way she could forgive us was if we allowed her to throw us a baby shower. This sudden turn of events left us surprised and skeptical about her motives. She pleaded how nothing would bring her more joy than to throw a grand celebration for me and her grandchild, taking care of everything. Gary looked at me curiously, but I remained skeptical. Barbara's sudden change of heart seemed more like a tactical move to regain control and assert her dominance, rather than a genuine attempt at reconciliation. Despite my reservations, Gary, always wanting to find a middle ground and keep the peace, entertained the idea of accepting her offer. I expressed my concerns to Gary, stressing that accepting her offer might only fuel her belief that her behavior was acceptable. Gary understood my perspective but hoped that allowing his mother to throw a baby shower could be a way for us to mend fences before the baby arrived. I reluctantly agreed, and Gary informed his mother to go ahead with the planning for my baby shower. She was overjoyed and expressed her gratitude for allowing her to take charge. Despite entrusting her with this responsibility, I assumed there would be some level of collaboration where she would seek my input and consider my preferences for my own baby shower, with the event still a month away. I expected more detailed planning for my baby shower in the coming week. To my dismay, my mother-in-law went rogue, taking charge of everything without consulting anyone, including me. When my mom tried to discuss the baby shower with her, my mother-in-law simply said everything had been decided, and it would be a surprise for me. The lack of communication and consideration left me feeling disheartened and frustrated. On the day of my baby shower, the air was filled with a mix of excitement and tension. I arrived at the venue, a local banquet hall, surrounded by close friends eager to celebrate our upcoming little one. However, I couldn't help but notice the outrageous decorations my mother-in-law had chosen. A sea of brown and beige balloons, creating a theme that was entirely her creation. I absolutely hated the decoration. It looked like a misguided attempt at a safari theme gone wrong. The overwhelming presence of brown and beige clashed with the vibrant atmosphere I had envisioned. I had imagined soft pastels and delicate touches, but my mother-in-law had gone the opposite way. Tension escalated when I saw an eye-catching display near the entrance. An enormous banner featuring an elaborate collage of my husband's baby pictures with Barbara. Everyone looked confused, wondering why she chose to display my husband's baby pictures during my baby shower. She laughed it off, saying she expected our baby to look exactly like my husband, and she was proud of how cute he was as a child. I stared at her, trying to comprehend if she had lost her mind. It was clear she was determined to make the day more about her experiences as a mother than about the imminent addition to our family. As more guests arrived, their expressions ranged from confusion to polite discomfort. Looking around the room, the sea of brown and beige balloons, coupled with the towering banner showcasing my mother-in-law and my husband, created an ambience far from the elegant and joyous atmosphere I had envisioned for my baby shower. I exchanged apologetic glances with some of my friends who clearly shared my sentiment. When my mother walked in, her eyes widened in shock as she observed the horror my mother-in-law had unleashed upon the venue. Her eyes then locked onto the banner, and I could sense her disbelief at the audacity of showcasing a collage that seemed more like an exhibition of my husband's childhood. In a bold move, my mother walked over to the banner. Her expression shifted from disbelief to determination. Without uttering a word, she firmly grabbed hold of the banner, decisively removing it from its prominent display. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward my mother as she carried away the intrusive display that overshadowed the celebration. I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude toward my mother for her unwavering support. My mother-in-law, who was busy talking to other guests, looked in horror as my mother threw the banner into the dustbin. In a disapproving tone, she asked what my mother thought she was doing, insisting the banner was a special touch to celebrate the baby and the family. Undeterred by the disapproval, my mother responded with a firm yet composed voice, asserting that the celebration was about me and my baby, not a showcase of my mother-in-law's personal achievements. The guests around them were drawn to this unexpected confrontation. Undeterred by the disapproval, my mother responded with a firm yet composed voice, asserting that the celebration was about me and my baby, not a showcase of my mother-in-law's personal achievements. The guests around them were drawn to this unexpected confrontation. My mother-in-law, sensing the attention shift, tried to regain control of the situation, explaining she thought it would be nice for everyone to know who was responsible for the event's beauty. She wanted everyone to see how cute Gary was as a child. However, my mother continued, reminding her that she begged me to allow her to throw the baby shower, and that it wasn't a platform for her personal agenda or an attempt to steal the spotlight. The room hushed as the exchange unfolded, with guests glancing at each other uncomfortably. Realizing her attempt to dictate the narrative had backfired, my mother-in-law retreated with a forced smile and returned to her conversations with other guests. Despite the tension lingering throughout the event, the baby shower continued, with me trying my best to focus on the positive energy for my friends and family. I thought there wouldn't be any more surprises from my mother-in-law, who seemed to be drinking a bit too much for a baby shower. We played various party games, and the guests were slowly starting to enjoy themselves. Then came the gift opening session, and everyone's thoughtful gifts for my baby were pleasant surprises. However, my anticipation turned to bewilderment when my mother-in-law handed me a conspicuously large gift box with an exaggerated smile. The room fell silent, and I felt a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. My mother looked at her angrily, and the guests exchanged awkward glances, unsure of how to react. Trying to diffuse the tension, I mustered a weak smile and thanked her for the thoughtful gift, suppressing the urge to roll my eyes. The situation escalated during the cake-cutting ceremony. My mother-in-law had ordered an extravagant tiered cake with over-the-top decorations. She made a big show of it, clinking her glass to make everyone look at her. Wondering what she was up to, we all looked at her curiously and waited for her to speak. Barbara then announced that she had come up with the perfect name for our baby girl. Keep in mind, we hadn't even settled on a name ourselves. She proudly declared that the baby would be named after her great-grandmother, with a name that seemed straight out of a Victorian novel. I was shocked and a little irritated that she assumed she had the naming rights. I stepped in politely, explaining that my husband and I wanted to pick our baby's name together. It was a decision we wanted to make as parents. However, my mother-in-law wasn't having any of it. She insisted she had the perfect name, and if I were a good daughter-in-law, I should accept it, given the money she had spent on the baby shower. I was shocked at her sense of entitlement. I firmly stated that only my husband and I had the right to name our baby, regardless of who hosted the baby shower. This decision was ours alone. That's when my mother-in-law started yelling at me in front of everyone, claiming I found myself in an extremely difficult situation as my mother-in-law, Barbara, became increasingly aggressive and disrespectful at my baby shower. She insisted that she should have the right to name my baby and criticized my upbringing, claiming I should be thanking her instead of denying her this supposed right. Barbara grew more and more aggressive, pointing her fingers at my face. My mother stepped in as a shield, but Barbara continued to shout, asserting herself as the actual mommy of my baby, claiming that she gave birth to my husband and it was his sperm that impregnated me. Her words were truly disgusting. Despite my mother's attempts to stop Barbara's nasty comments, she just got angrier, insulting me and claiming my mom did a terrible job raising me. It was clear she had too much to drink, and trying to talk sense into her was pointless. The situation was getting worse, making everyone uncomfortable. Realizing the escalating situation, I decided I had endured enough humiliation. Trying to salvage some dignity, I walked out with the gifts my friends had generously brought, leaving behind the present my mother-in-law had given me. However, in her intoxicated state, Barbara snatched the gifts back from my hand and tossed them to the ground, accusing me of being ungrateful and a witch who was coming between her and her son. The tense atmosphere drew more attention, and I noticed some people starting to film the incident. To contain the chaos, I asked one of my close friends to politely request people to leave the event. Undeterred, Barbara continued hurling nasty accusations, creating a scene that no one could have anticipated. Frustration turned to anger, and as a last resort, I decided to call the police to remove her from my vicinity, as I was starting to feel extremely unsafe with her aggressive behavior. Yes, you read that right. I had to involve the police at my own baby shower because of my toxic mother-in-law. When the officers showed up, Barbara went into full drama mode, pointing fingers at me and painting me as the mastermind behind the chaotic event. The cops, thankfully understanding, attempted to reason with her. However, being drunk, she resisted their efforts and even started yelling at the police, which didn't work in her favor. The situation escalated to the point where she was arrested on the spot. I left the event with my mother and close friends, all of us shaken up by the unsettling incident. Since this incident, my husband and I have been dealing with the fallout. My mother-in-law is on a full-blown guilt trip, playing the victim card and garnering sympathy from some family members who were not present at the baby shower because they don't live in the same city. My husband, although he understands why I called the cops, thinks I took it a bit too far. He believes that I could have called him or his father for help. So Reddit, am I wrong for calling the cops on my mother-in-law for ruining my baby shower and pretending to be the actual mommy of the baby? Update 1. I am overwhelmed with the response I have received since deciding to post about my baby shower. I would like to thank everyone for supporting my decision to call the cops. I had never witnessed such an aggressive reaction from my mother-in-law before, and the level of aggression she displayed at the baby shower left me genuinely concerned about the possibility of physical harm, especially considering the potential impact on my unborn child. Since the incident, every guest who attended the baby shower has reached out to express their support. Some of them have even shared recordings of the entire debacle, which I intend to show to my husband. My plan is to have a serious conversation with him in the coming weekend about the future with his mother. Update 2. I showed the recording to my husband. As mentioned earlier, my husband and I found ourselves sitting down for a serious conversation about the events that had transpired. I explained to him in detail how his mother's behavior had escalated throughout the entire ordeal, from the hidden pregnancy revelation to the outrageous baby shower. I described in detail the yelling, accusations, and bizarre gifts she presented. I then shared the recordings with him, which he watched visibly horrified. Watching the videos seemed to bring a reality check for him, making him confront the uncomfortable truth about his mother's actions. He started to sincerely apologize to me for underestimating the severity of the situation and acknowledged that I was right in calling the cops. I had no idea they had gotten this bad. I'm so sorry you had to go through all that, he expressed, his face reflecting both regret and frustration. He admitted that he had never imagined his mother could be this toxic, as this behavior seemed so out of character for her. He reassured me that he was on my side and emphasized that my safety and well-being, especially during pregnancy, were his top priorities. We then delved into the underlying issues, discussing how his mother's need for control and validation had overshadowed what should have been a joyous occasion. Gary, grappling with the reality of his mother's actions, shared his own concerns about her behavior and acknowledged that she had crossed a line. I told him that after how his mother had behaved with me in front of everyone, I wanted to cut all ties with her. I continued to tell him that he could have a relationship with her if he wanted, but me and our child would not be a part of her life, at least until his mother went for counseling to deal with her aggressive behavior. Hearing this, Gary expressed that what his mother had done was beyond disgusting, and he was willing to cut ties with her as well. I assured him that he did not have to do any such thing, but my husband insisted that his mother had disrespected me and therefore did not have the right to be in our lives anymore. He understood that his mother's behavior was not just about the baby shower, but might have been a culmination of long-standing issues. Moving ahead, Gary has reassured me that he will personally communicate our decision to his mother, making it clear that cutting her off from our lives is entirely his choice. I have also asked him to warn her that if she decides to show up unexpectedly at our doorstep to force me to accept her back into our lives, then I will be forced to call the cops on her again. Update 3. It's been a month since my last update. To everyone asking, me and the baby are doing okay. I can't wait to meet my child very soon as the date approaches. Since my last update, we have ceased all communication with Barbara. Gary had a conversation with his parents, and his father assured him that he would take the necessary steps to ensure that my mother-in-law understands the boundaries we've set and respects our decision. In the aftermath of cutting ties with Barbara, our lives have experienced a noticeable shift. The absence of constant drama and toxicity has brought about a newfound sense of peace and tranquility in our household. Gary and I are now able to focus on preparing for the arrival of our baby without the looming cloud of Barbara's disruptions. The support we received from friends and family has been invaluable during this challenging time. My parents and my close friends have been pillars of strength, offering their encouragement and understanding. Even some family members who were initially unaware of the extent of Barbara's behavior have come forward to express their support after witnessing the shocking events at the baby shower through the viral videos. Our journey is far from over, but this experience has strengthened our bond and highlighted the importance of facing challenges together as a united front. The decision to sever ties with Barbara was not made lightly, but it has proven to be a necessary step for our well-being. While there may be lingering challenges, we are optimistic about the positive changes this choice has brought into our lives. As we eagerly await the arrival of our little one, we are determined to build a loving and supportive family environment that prioritizes the well-being of both parents and child.